Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Sports Business and Broadcast Zoom meeting. My name is Dave Leno, and for almost now 3 months, I've been hosting these free Zoom meetings to connect all of us during these trying times. The exciting part is we'll be getting back to work soon for those of you that work in sports media or others that are interested one day finding a position with a team or network that you like. And I hope everybody on here sincerely finds those jobs as they begin to re-enter, or do you reinvent yourself to find positions that can suit an organization? We have a very comprehensive presentation. It's going to be a lot of fun. Like I told you, I was up very early this morning when we did this, in case you're watching on replay, and really excited to share my thoughts about the business and our presentation today. So some things to think about during today's meeting. What it's like to go live. I think most of you on here are broadcast focused. So we'll touch on what it's like to be in that moment where the red light's on, you're looking to a camera, and perhaps there could be hundreds, if not thousands, of viewers watching your broadcast, your report, if you're in news or sports, etc. Even if you're on the radio, this can apply to you. So we'll discuss how you control the pacing and the tenor of your voice during a stand-up, during an open, and how do you escape the nerves, which is easier said than done. We'll also go into the on-camera execution, that confidence that I think we would all agree on here that you need to possess, how you use your voice as an instrument, and the art of storytelling. There's a lot of journalists that, especially those that we follow, both male and female, that get to the national level. How do they craft a story at a well-documented story in just a short amount of time, where they might only have 45 to 90 seconds for a broadcast? We'll discuss how TV, for those of you that want to get into television, or you do this maybe online only, how it's a visual medium, and ways to improve that part of the field and yourself. We'll also dive into broadcast writing. I think that's very important, even if those of you despise writing and don't want to be a newspaper guy or girl. I think it's very important to sharpen your writing skills, even when you're going into sports. And we'll discuss simplifying your scripts, how to choose your words more carefully, and shorten your words when you're on the air. I'll also go into the art of interviewing as well, and learning how to be a good listener, asking the right questions under a time constraint amid a whole lot of pressure. And then I think one of the topics that I know we've talked about over the last 3 months on these Zooms is networking. What's the right and wrong thing to do when connecting with somebody, and preparing for the next step in your career. So today, the agenda is a presentation on a variety of things, including TV hosting, on-camera presence, and broadcast writing. However, I will also go into, because there's a lot of people on here that I know are watching now, maybe will watch us on replay, are in college and have some college experience. So I'll talk about what are some steps you should be doing as you're in school and preparing to go back to school in the fall, and some things that I think you should be thinking about when you go to your next athletic department event and report on a given game. We'll also discuss chemistry on set between yourself and your co-anchor, or if you're the play-by-play and your analyst, vice versa. We'll go into detail, as I mentioned, broadcast writing versus passive and active voice. I'll go into more detail. How do we improve over time and market over the years? I will talk about how I take a sheet and say, this is where I was in 2013 in my career, and this is where I am going into the 2020 fall season. And I'll share some of the things, I'm very transparent on these forums, and I'll share some ideas about how I go about tracking how I strengthen my craft over the years and from season to season, even week to week. We'll also talk about how we get advice from others, and we'll review the session today. So before I start the meeting, here's how it's going to work. And again, I appreciate everybody joining us today. It's going to be very interactive. So all I ask is, as I go through the PowerPoint, if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand virtually in the Zoom app. I think it's down in the middle. I'm sure everybody knows by now how to do that. I think it's down in the middle. You hit raise your hand, I'll see it. And when the time's right, I'll say, all right, we're going to take a question on this slide or this topic. You're welcome to chime in. All I ask is let's keep it brief and keep it moving. You're welcome to follow up, of course. Nobody's limited on here. But I want this to be not a lecture. That's not the point. I don't want this to be a college class. I want this to be very interactive, and I want you to get as much out of this as I did preparing for it. So I really appreciate everybody's time today. Feel free to chat with yourselves in the group as I start the presentation today. You'll see a lot of pictures from a lot of broadcasts that I've been a part of. You see the current work that I have going on, just to give you a reference point of where I'm coming from. Have a lot of experience with other teams and networks as well, which I can get into in a moment. So here we go. All right, so what it's like being on camera. So a lot of you on here, and I can learn from you too on this, about that pressured situation where you're standing on site at a ball game. There's hundreds of people watching you. You have a little earpiece in, what we call an IFB. You're listening to maybe the producer or somebody back at the studio if you make it to a affiliated market station or a broadcast team or network. And it's tough, right? Because you're trying to collect your thoughts, remember everything you're prepared for that live hit. How do you gather and collect yourself in the moment? Sometimes you're going to be under a time constraint, but I always advise people, and I say to myself a bunch, to rehearse your material often. I'm the type of guy, and this doesn't have to work for everybody, it's just my opinion today, is I like to write things down on a notepad, and I like to script out what I'm going to say. But I understand I'm not going to be able to read from those notes. My broadcast experience, I have read from a teleprompter in the past with a news station, a PBS affiliate in Indiana, when I was at Indiana University in Bloomington as a student. And I interned and got on-air experience with a professional outlet. But now I do a lot of TV without any teleprompter at all. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but you have to work on your material before you're about to deliver on air. I wouldn't advise anybody, no matter where you're in, going into college, in college, or coming out, to just wing it on a broadcast. Don't take a day off in this industry, especially in the day of social media. You never know who's watching out there. Very important. You know, how do we get rid of the nervousness and handling pressure? Many of you have asked me that over time. And that pertains to you individually. For me, when I start an ESPN broadcast, New York Riptide on MSG Networks in New York, or the Philadelphia Union on 6ABC and PHL 17, even if I'm emceeing an event for the Philadelphia Freedoms of World Team Tennis or another team network or establishment, you know, I take a couple deep breaths. I know the job in front of me. I read over the material right before I'm about to go on air. And I can't read every single thing, but I rehash the rundown of how things are going to go, at least for the first block. And in a commercial break, I'll review the B block and the C block, so forth. So I'm constantly looking over the material. I would say to you though, don't try to memorize everything. And maybe you're the type of person that is very good at memorizing stuff. But I would advise you that less is more, especially when you're on TV. You'll understand what I mean later on in the presentation to simplify your words. Trust me when I tell you, when I go back and agonize over my work, the shorter, the simpler my sentences are, the better I am on air, the better I sound and look on TV. There's no there's no likes, there's no stutters, there's no awkward pauses. I have a routine. I get myself pumped up. Maybe you guys do, where you go, you give a fist pump to your broadcast partner. Maybe you play music in the booth. I jam music on the car ride to the stadium. You know, I apply my own makeup. I check the clothing, or I'll ask the stage manager, hey, is my jacket on straight? Is my tie straight? And I'll look over the notes as I prefaced before. Very important when you're on TV And I can't stress this enough to kids for those, and I'm young, so I don't even know why I'm saying kids, but to those of you that are in college or going into school, or maybe it's your first job, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And I know it's a cliche, and I hate using cliches. I do not use them on air. I try not to, but I'm telling you, everybody, I see so many people look so disheveled when going to games. And it's not just people that aren't on TV. And I think everybody knows what I mean there. It's people in the press box that we know. And you got to present yourself professionally. Now, everybody will define what looks nice. And I'm not saying you need to go out and buy expensive clothes like a Canali suit or a Tom Ford suit or, you know, a Zenga tie. It's not what I'm getting at all. I think you all know how to look presentable in your given workplaces. But I would advise you to dress up for your job. I'm very big on that. I know a lot of TV outlets today, they're not wearing, everybody's dressing down. They're wearing suit sneakers, which is fine, or they're not wearing a tie and they have the open collar. Sometimes they don't have the jacket. Sometimes you have to follow network protocols, and your bosses may say, hey, no ties on this show. Hey, we're going to wear jeans and a button down. That's fine, but I've always taken the approach that it's better to dress up versus dressing down, because nobody's going to fault you for dressing up on a show. When you're on TV, very important to watch your hand movement. And I was guilty of this early on in my career. And then sometimes, I guess, you know, still happens, where you're waving hands as you're doing a report, especially if you have a lav mic, you know, with a mic clipped on, not a wired mic. Very important to remember, and you're going to forget these things, so I suggest writing them down to remind yourself for your next broadcast. But especially if you're younger and watching today, keep one hand in your pocket and the other hand on the mic. Another suggestion would be hold a notepad. I think it's awesome seeing reporters with a notepad, especially when they go to video. You can look down and read from your notes when you know the broadcast is going to video. There's no shame in you looking down and looking over your material and reading. I do it on my pregame and postgame shows when I write down notes. And even if people see me read, if they cut back to me on camera and I'm looking down, as long as I don't make myself like a deer in the headlights and just do an awkward movement from the page to the camera, it's fine. And people understand, oh, this guy's a hard worker. He's working, he's writing things down. No shame in that. So if you're a field reporter and you're doing a football game, a stand up at the stadium after the game, the lights are nearly off, and you're doing your report, even if you're looking down at your story back and forth, and I'm not saying to read word for word, if you do it naturally, and you'll understand what I mean by natural when you go back and watch your material over and over, that will help you immensely. So just a suggestion. You obviously don't need to do it, but some things that I've worked on, especially when I've done stand-ups in my career or leading into a package, if I'm holding a script or a stack of papers, even if it's fake and nobody in the TV audience needs to know, just something to keep in mind. Somebody mentioned this in one of the comments registering. I think it was Sean. And Sean, thanks for saying this. Show some damn personality on air. Be excited. Be happy. Don't fake it. Be yourself. Laugh. React to a comment naturally. How we're all talking to each other here. Very informal setting right now. This is not going out on ABC, NBC, CBS, right? It's okay to be natural. One of the best ways to go about learning how to show your personality is watch, especially morning news shows. Yes, they're lighthearted. Yes, they're funny. Of course, they'll be more sincere and more solemn on those specific pieces versus like a 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, like nightly news on like ABC with David Ure or NBC with Lester Holt. I understand the difference there. But to show some personality and some levity in your broadcast, I would suggest watching morning news programs or sports shows that are fun. When the show is having fun, when they're laughing, if I'm on the set at the Philadelphia Union with Marissa, my co-host, and we have a player and we're laughing at a comment that the player said, it tends to work out really, really well on TV, even if half the audience thinks it's funny, the other half doesn't. Trust me when I tell you, when I go back and watch some of those moments, are awesome. And they're awesome for a reel too, especially everybody just likes to show the clean segments and all that. But I found that a lot of the men and women who get these big time jobs, they have some creativity in their reels. They show the lighthearted moment. So I'm not saying crack a joke just to crack a joke. That's not what I'm getting at. And please don't misunderstand me when I say that. But it's okay, even if you're doing, I know there's a lot of play-by-play broadcasters or hosts on here. It's okay to have fun on the job. I can tell you ESPN tells their play-by-play and analysts, have fun. It's sports. It's a game. With news, I know it's a totally different story, but I think you know the difference of what stories can inject some humor, especially if you're a man or woman on the street versus a story about a fire or some other extenuating circumstance. Really important to smile. I think I forget that a bunch, and I write down on one of my reminders. It's always on there on my note cards that I bring to a broadcast. Make sure to smile, and not like a fake smile, but you know, and I'm not saying like you need to be, if you're the play-by-play guy going from analyst to on camera and doing like a fake smile like that back to the analyst. That's not what I'm getting at there. But acknowledge the viewers at home. When you're talking, feel free, stretch the lips a little bit, smile at the camera. Don't look as serious. I think I make a lot of facial expressions. And sometimes I'm looking at myself like, God, I look like, I know I'm so caught up and I feel the pressure and I want to get it right on the first try. And I'm sure a lot of you are like me in this business, but smile, have fun. If people see you smiling, especially for those of you that are involved in sports broadcasting or production, I think everybody else will enjoy the presentation. So please don't forget that. It sounds very elementary, but I hear that on a lot of critiques from a variety of people over the years, where producers of the highest kind are telling their talent to smile. Another thing is slowing down. If you think you are going slow, you are not going slow enough. Remember that. I constantly have to tell myself that all the time, because I see that I have all this information in front of me that I want to get in the A block on this particular topic. But I hate to break it to you, everybody, especially when you're not working with a teleprompter and you're working on a pregame show or a broadcast, especially on a postgame show. Everything you're thinking, you're just not going to have time to get out over the air. The more thoughts you have, the better it would be for no unnatural pauses. But I would suggest when you're doing a broadcast, and if you can master this at a young age, your future will be bright in this business, no matter whether you go into TV, radio, PR, behind the scenes. Slow down your enunciation. I cannot state that enough. You will speak smoothly. You will be more polished. Everybody at home will understand you. For those of you that might have an accent, whether you're from the East Coast or from whether you're down south or whether you're from the Midwest, a national audience can understand what you have to say. I see 2 questions are up, so 2 hands are raised. So let's go right to Ari Bluestein with our first question. Hey, Ari.
Hey, Dave. Yeah, actually, I just wanted to add something onto your stand-up in terms of having notes ready. What I do for my stand-up, if I know there's a package and they're playing highlights of the players, and that usually takes up the middle portion of the stand-up, I just have what I memorized, that first part of the stand-up, and then as soon as they roll the package, I look down at my notes because I'm not on camera anymore. And then if I know they're going to go back to me at the end, then I just make sure my notes aren't seen. But I agree with you, it's not a bad thing to have the notes there, but that's a little strategy that I've gone through, knowing when the package is going to run and knowing what I need to memorize and when I need to put my notes away.
So let me have a follow-up there with you, Ari. So if you're saying you're memorizing your lead into your package, are you reading off a teleprompter? And if you're not, if you can share with everybody, how are you memorizing your 1 or 2 lines, whatever your lead it is? What is your process?
Yeah, I have never used a teleprompter, Dave, and this is either with Drexel when I do the NBC Sports Philadelphia broadcasts, or with the Pennsylvania Cable Network for the high school broadcast. No teleprompter, and really, I kind of use a very similar open. Thank you for joining us. I usually have that, and I know my partner's name, and then I'll usually lead into my partner about the first player we're going to feature. So as long as I know the first player that we're going to feature, and maybe one key piece of information like what year they are, how many goals they have if we're talking about soccer. And as long as I lead in and my color analyst knows what they're going to discuss, then that's really all I need to memorize. Then I'll go to my paper for the second player and maybe some additional information.
Awesome. Thank you very much for chiming in today. I really appreciate it. That's great stuff. Let's go to Sam Hyman with more. Hey, Sam, what can you share with this?
Hey, Dave. Thanks for setting this up. This has been great so far. You mentioned smiling on camera. One of the things that I have been guilty of sometimes is, especially for smaller scale broadcasts, is there's not as large of a crowd, and so sometimes the tone of your voice can just naturally lower, and you're not as engaged. So how important do you think it is to remind yourself to smile while you're off camera to bring that sense of engagement if you're not doing a game that, say, has thousands of viewers, especially for the younger people in here? Like, what would you say to that, and how would you go about reminding yourself to do that?
So great question. And I will tell you, and I think maybe you've been in the same position, I have been, and that is I've done so many games where I could count literally the number of people in the stands. And for anybody that thinks a lot of these broadcasters that are getting back to work, that they should be complaining because nobody's there, I call total BS, because there's a lot of you on here that have done minor league ball, that have been small college stuff. You've climbed the ranks, and you understand you've done double headers for minor league baseball that have, like I said, could have 11 people, could have 20 people in the stands. I've called minor league hockey on PA, and I tell you there were probably less than 10 people in there. And I'm not trying to bash what it was. It was just an early game, and the camp kids didn't show up. And, my voice was echoing off the walls. I felt like I was the only person there. So, Sam, to answer your question, what I do, and tell me if you do anything different, I treat everything, I really do. I really treat every assignment the same, no matter if I'm getting paid maybe some more money or I'm getting paid less, or when I came out of college and could not get a job in this business, working for free. And I felt over time, and I still feel like that to this day, that the work will speak for itself, and you never know who's listening and who's watching. You mentioned smiling off camera. It's very important. Now, everybody's different. Everybody has a different personality. I'm the type of guy, I think those of you that have come to know me through these things, I like to have fun. I'm energetic. I'm passionate about the business. I want to get better. I also want to help others. That's the type of guy I am. I think if people read that you have bad body language, you don't give a crap, I think it sets a horrible tone for the broadcast. I've heard of so many big productions and small productions go to a halt, are terrible, because there's one person, whether it's the broadcaster, a producer, a graphics person, that just goes off when everybody has a bad day and not smiling, not happy. And I'm not saying you need to be all like, it's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but I think you need to enjoy the job that you have. Because, Sam, I think you would agree with me that there's so many people that would love to be doing the game that you're doing in that time. And I guarantee you they would do that broadcast or that show for free just to get the experience. So I would suggest thinking of those things. Sam, I'll say this, and to everybody, and I believe I said this on a couple Zooms so far for the last 3 months. I go into every broadcast. I look around, whether I'm morning shoot around or getting to the stadium. I like to get there really early. I'll look around, and I will remember when I could not get a job in the business. I will remember what that feeling was like, what it was like when some gigs have closed, what the feeling like was when others open, what I went through at Indiana, lugging equipment from one side of this big campus to the other. I didn't have a car at the time on campus when I was a freshman and a sophomore. So I remember those humbling moments, and that gets me in a mood, even if there's a time where I stumble on a certain part of the broadcast, which tends to happen. And I'm like, oh man, in the commercial break, I can't believe I did that. But then I think about everybody makes mistakes. So long
Yeah,
answer for you, Sam. What's your take on that?
I love that take, and I just to follow up,
Please.
I have games where I do have an analyst. I have some games where I don't have an analyst, and for people that are in a position where they do the games by themselves, um, how like what would you say is the best way to practice that engagement and trying to sound like you're not flat, because that's one thing that I think for me, like having even though solo sometimes is not as fun, it's there's an opportunity to practice something and only focus on how you can develop and not necessarily have to worry about somebody else. There is a little bit of a pro, I think, to that as far as just your craft of your tone.
I called many games by myself over the years for smaller employers, from when I was in college, coming out of college, and up until I could say maybe a couple of years ago. And I can think of some recent gigs that aren't play-by-play specific, but I could tell you a few that come to mind. I've called France versus I think it wasn't Japan. It was in the She Believes Cup. I think it was France versus Brazil that comes to mind. The She Believes Cup, it came through Chester, where the Philadelphia Union played. The U.S. played Japan. That was on FS1. I did the other game for the World Feed. I called it by myself. I've done plenty of soccer games over the years by myself. How do you not stay flat? Let the game come to you as you start out the broadcast. You get into the weeds of the storylines and you set up each team, what they've gone through to get to this point. But let the broadcast dictate how you're going to announce the game. If there's a big, if there's an in-swinging ball from the corner and a chance for a header, obviously I'm the type of announcer that might get into that particular play because it was a goal-scoring opportunity or a shot from 35 yards out. The keeper dives to the top left corner, makes a save, tips it over the bar. You can get into it there. I think there's those moments, Sam, that will allow you to just organically project your voice. Not be a screamer, though, when I say that. I will tell you, and Kai wanted me to talk about this last Zoom, and I did a little bit. I could talk about it here briefly. One of the gigs that I like to tell some people is I did Japanese baseball games in English for a company called One World Sports in Stamford, Connecticut. They had a 4-story building on 250 Harbor Drive, right around the corner from where NBC Sports moved their offices. And I got contracted to call Japanese baseball games from the studio. I would go in at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, get a lineup that was in Japanese, but it had the position numbers. It had 4 for second base, 9 for right field. So I could figure out who the players were. And I would do that 4-hour broadcast by myself in a little audio booth. I'm looking around. Maybe that was 3 chairs wide, maybe 4 chairs deep. That taught me a lot. I had little prep at my disposal. I can only use Google Chrome to translate sites from Japanese to English. I had to make friends with that's kind of a bad phrase, not make friends, but I befriended somebody who was a scout with the New York Yankees who knew Japanese baseball. And that person helped me with a lot of the questions I had about the Japanese Central League, about the Yomiuri Giants, about Americans who play Japanese ball. And I would say, Sam, it was all about the reps, all about the amount of games. For those of you that have not heard about the reps, it's the amount of games that you're doing, or the amount of opportunities you're getting on air. I think over time, I just got so comfortable walking in. I was not seen on camera. I was wearing sweats like this. I had a headset on. I could hear what was going on at the Tokyo Dome. And I just called what I saw off of 2 monitors by myself. And I think as I did 10, 15, 20 games over a couple of years, I found that I just got into a groove and more comfortable. And I trusted the prep, albeit it wasn't the prep that I would do because I do a lot of it on my broadcasts. But I would tell you it was just the amount of work I did. And over time, I learned when to go a little bit higher in my voice, get into it a little bit more versus restraining back, even though it was a big play. So I'd say to you that the more and more you do the games at a smaller scale by yourself, the better you will be. I will caution everybody on here, lastly, and say that You don't want to be stuck just reading from your spotting board if you're by yourself just to fill time. Now, I've said on a previous Zoom, when you call on our last one, when you call games from the studio, have more prep at your disposal in case of disaster moments, like the screen going out, the feed going down. It's just a wide shot and you need to fill time. Very important. Call the game. That's what people want to see. There's a lot of networks that say they want more banter or replay because they can see what's going on. But I think people are watching your product to see what's going on. And that's the type of announcer I am. I think I need to do a little bit of a better job to be fully transparent, being more conversational, getting into it with my analysts over play and picking those moments. I think we all can probably do that a little bit more efficiently. But over time, I would say if you're doing the game by yourself, call the action, tell people what's going on in the bench, what they're not seeing. Tell us about the players and the emotions, in particular if you're doing games on radio. Tell us things that people who would be sitting next to you would notice, but everybody else at home cannot. And Sam, I know that was rambling and long, but that's everything that came to mind.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to throw that out there. So
no, I appreciate it. Keep chiming in. This is awesome. Let's go to Tony Perkins. I know Tony teaches at Arizona. I interned for Tony in Indiana at WTIU. He's worked for CCTV and others, brings local and national broadcasting experience to the table. In addition to his teaching, Tony, I hope that was a great intro for you. What's your take on this topic?
Great job, Dave. Thanks a lot. Thanks
Look at that studio too.
Yeah, I'm actually working. It's this morning in Tucson. It's about it's 8:38. I'm in a radio studio and doing morning anchoring for the news.
Nice.
And it's a big news day happening all around the country. So I've only got a few minutes to talk with you and talk with the crowd. First of all, because I've been doing television and live radio for almost 30 years. One of the most important things, especially for those of you who are doing sports in an arena or at a stadium, is get that mental image, get that in your mind. Not necessarily what you're going to look like or how you're going to sound, but imagine yourself in the moment. There were times at Indiana, go down to Assembly Hall, I'd have to do a pregame bit, and I'd get there really early, and I would find out where I would have to stand on the sideline, and stand there and imagine myself in the moment with whatever I had to say, whatever information I had to convey, or however much time I had to do it. But the important thing was to stand there for a minute or 2 minutes or so that when you came out to be on the air and the layup line is going on behind you and the crowd is there and all the noise is happening, you're not going to be distracted by all of that extraneous stuff. You're going to be able to better concentrate on what you're trying to say, what you're trying to do. Get that mental image in your head. Also, know your subject. You talk about prep all the time, and it's really true. Know your subject inside and out, backwards and forwards. If you're going to talk about numbers, statistics, make those numbers about people. Relate it to the players. Relate it to whatever individuals those numbers are about. Sure, say the numbers, but people want to hear stories about other people, not necessarily about figures and about raw statistics. Remember to breathe and use short sentences. One thing about getting the nervousness out of you when you're about to get on the air. A stand-up comedian told me this many years ago. He said, when you're standing there, shake it out. Do this. Get your shoulders going. Get your arms going, and do that about 30 seconds before you go on mic. And you'll get a lot of that physically. Get a lot of that out of you, and you'll be ready to speak. Breathe, and if you're interested, if you're worried about getting more energy into what you're saying, take your breaths in I guess in shorter gaps. If you're accustomed to breathing after every sentence, take a breath within the sentence. It'll help your delivery a little bit more, and it'll actually relax you a little bit more, because you know what your breathing pattern is usually, and it's not going to be normal when you get on the air, and you're going to try to get to that place, as far as being calm and relaxed and know what you're talking about. But just naturally, if you're in the moment, you're going to be hyped up, you're going to be excited, and you're going to speak faster. Like you said, Dave, slower, and if you think you're going slow, you're not going slow enough. I've found that to be the case, and a lot of times I've done live television on a daily basis when I was in Indianapolis, and that's really true. Real quick, a funny story about one of the things we were talking about it being an embarrassing situation. Mackey Arena, Purdue University. This was back in the late 90s or early 2000s. Had to lug a ton of broadcast equipment down the sideline to our location in the corner of the court, and of course we were late in getting the stuff, getting the cables, getting the equipment dragged down there. And Mackey Arena back then, if anyone's from Indiana and knows this, you've got a sideline and a large amount of space before you get to the first row of seats, and you're just exposed. Everybody is watching you, and you're holding up things. This was of course right after you do the announcer does the pregame and everything, the analyst, and you're trying to get the gear out of the way as soon as possible. And you look up, and you see the players on the court waiting. You see the officials waiting. They're looking at you, and you just want to crawl in a hole. Right. But those are the things that you think about and you remember. As the years go by, Dave, as you're talking about, you remember where you've been, what that was like, what the tough times were like, what the good times were like, and that'll help you as your years go on by. And hopefully everybody who's in this on this Zoom has a long career going, or will have a long career going in the future. If you guys want any information, I'm willing to help anybody out. Coach you guys on live television performance, radio performance. I'm on LinkedIn. Shameless plug. Look me up there.
No, that's great. Thanks for sharing all those stories, Tony. Good luck on the newscast today. I really appreciate everything you've done for me personally.
Thanks a lot, Dave, and good luck. Got to go.
All right, I'll let you go. Thanks very much, Tony. That's Tony Perkins, everybody. And please do take his advice, reach out to him, say hello. Tony's an awesome, awesome guy and a very talented professional. So, some of these moments we talked about, just to wrap up this slide. Lastly, being smooth on your own cameras, speaking slower, as Tony said, very important that he stated that another time, and that polished toss to a package, to a sound on tape, to when you're tossing out to somebody in the field where you're sending it. All right, John Smith has a report at 5th and Girard in Philadelphia. Hello, John. Just something short, sweet, to the point. Let the reporter tell the story. Don't take away his or her facts. But when you're nervous, take a few breaths, relax. And I know that's easier said than done, but if you have the ability, and we'll get into this later about stand-ups, to do it a couple of times, even though you nailed it on the first take, have another crack at it. I would suggest, and I don't want to jump ahead here, but when you do play-by-play, I would recommend trying some live opens if you have the opportunity to on your broadcast. Very important. So for on-camera opens, I think a lot of you are very interested in whether you want to be a play-by-play guy or girl, or you are in play-by-play, or you're a studio host on TV or radio. Very crucial to come on the air strong. That first voice needs to be dynamic. Welcome to the American Conference on ESPN. We're nestled at the Liacouras Center, where today the Temple Owls coming in at 2-2 square off against the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. Hi, everybody. Alongside John Smith, I'm Dave Leno. And John, so instead of saying, you're watching the American Conference on ESPN. Today from the Liacouras Center, Temple goes up against Tulsa. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Do you see the difference? And I'm not saying I'm faking the performance. I'm projecting my voice. I'm using it as an instrument. A lot of people say to me, your voice may sound it sounds a little deeper and differently on TV. And for those of you that have looked up my stuff, it does to me. And I've constantly been trying to to speak how I'm speaking to you. But sometimes when I'm louder in turn or in a microphone, my voice sounds deeper, and I say, I'm not actually faking my voice. I'm just projecting. And I used to sing and I used to act in the school plays, and I was very much into that as a young kid. And I think that's really helped me get to where I am. But I think your opening needs to be strong. Like JP Dellacamera said a few months ago, he's the famed broadcaster with the Union and Fox Sports, does all the World Cups. You know, JP said at one point, I think it was an ESPN broadcast he did, the producer said, you know, you really came on too strong. His mic was too hot in the open of the broadcast. So you don't want to be screaming when you come on the air, but I would say, you know, give some energy. That energy sets the tone. A lot of producers, when I do an ESPN broadcast, for those that maybe I haven't worked with, will say, and they might not know my style, you know, they'll say in the talk back, which just goes to the play-by-play and the analyst, big energy here. All right, guys, let's have a great show, everybody, but let's come out strong. And, you know, you don't need to tell me. There's some opens you can find on YouTube where I'm like, you know, you're watching the American or you're watching the Big Ten on ESPN. It's like, you know, you can do it loud, but you don't want to go crazy with it. But definitely get people, draw the eyes to your game. So that's important too, whether you're doing, you know, a broadcast for just your small college at LaSalle, at Princeton, at Akron, if you're doing an Ivy League package or on the MAC, or if you work for a radio station in college, high school, or professionally. Have a strong open, even if you're a radio host and don't do play-by-play at all. Come on the air strong. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's show on Sports Radio 94 WIP. We're counting down the top 10 Philadelphia sports athletes in the last half century. My name's Dave Leno. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Number 5 on the list is famed Phillies pitcher Steve Carlton. So, like, I think you all get what I'm saying there is have some fun with your show. Come out strong on your broadcast. For television, know the difference between a one shot, which is like a tight shot right at you, versus a 2-shot, a wide shot with your co-anchor. Very important to understand for those of you that are in TV or wanting to get into television, to ask your producer or your director, the ones that are putting the show together with you, how the show is going to be shot and how people will see the show at home. And you may think that's an elementary question and something you don't need to worry about. I would advise it's something to bring up during your meetings. When are you going to show me on camera? When are you going to show my analyst? Are we going to be shown together? Is it just a one-camera shoot and we're just going to be shown together no matter if Dave's talking or Scott's talking? Understand that. And if Scott's talking, am I off camera? How do I know I'm off camera? So it's important to see when you have multi-camera shows, for those of you that get to some of the bigger productions, understand when to turn your chair to look at a camera, when to look at your analyst, when to talk into the camera when you don't have a teleprompter. Very important to have that strong tone, but be conversational at the same time. Excuse me while I get a coffee here. For your opens, a lot of the producers that I get in contact with will tell me, what's the most important info about this game or report? We all been guilty at this, trying to jam too much information in the open, whether you're hosting, like a pregame show I'm talking about and hosting here, or play-by-play, not so much a nightly news show because you're following a script off of the teleprompter. But for play-by-play or like a pregame show, for example, or you're coming on camera to talk about the game before your broadcast, even if you're working for your school and it's just going on the internet, right? You don't have to get in every single thing off the bat. Save material for your broadcast. What are some ways to do that? Come up with some bullet points, write them down, some things your audience needs to know right off the bat if they don't know the teams at all. Now, you may be saying, Dave, I work on smaller shows. The only people that are paying to watch my games are family of the players and people who work in the athletics department or kids who go to the school. That's fine. You have to know your audience too. I would suggest, though, if you want to prepare to send material for some bigger companies along your career, start acting like it no matter where you are in your broadcast journey. If you're at the lower level and you're coming out of college where you're scraping together things and you got one job and you're just calling games over the internet or on YouTube Live or for your athletic department's website, we've all done it. Try to call that game as if you are calling that game for ESPN or for CBS or Fox. Treat that game like it's a big game. Remember, Sean McDonough came on here on this Zoom and said he treats every game like it's the Super Bowl. Some people might not agree with that, but I tend to side with Sean there. Treat it with the same prep, no matter if you're doing a Duke versus North Carolina, or you're doing a local college around your neck of the woods. Very important to go in with as much prep as you can. I do understand, having said that sometimes when you do a high school or small college game, you're not going to have as much prep at your disposal like you would at a Division I college where they have the beautiful game notes and you can see and find everything online. You might need to do the hard work, make some phone calls, talk with people, call the high school coach. I guarantee he's just talking to maybe a local reporter from the Daily Gazette and nobody else, and his players. It's probably it. Make the phone call. Spend the time. On your opens, I would suggest being shorter and more concise. I'd say when I go back and watch my material, and this is just my opinion, some of you will not agree with everything I'm saying, and that's okay. And you're welcome to share your thoughts here by raising your hand again if you're just joining us. That the shorter I am and the quicker I get to my analysts, especially with an opening thought, the better that open is. The more inclined I am to include that in a demo reel as opposed to having a long-winded thing like Al Michaels or Joe Buck, where they're on camera and it's a solo shot of them. We would all love to be on that position with NBC and with Fox one day, but that's not the shows that we're doing right now. And probably the jobs that you're going to get in the near future aren't going to be solo shots with you having a 2-minute preamble about the game, unless you're calling the game by yourself and that's what your production is all about. Totally get it there. Don't ramble. Have short, concise points, what Tony said. And I would try to get to your analyst as soon as you can. I'll give you one example. I see Donnie has a question or might want to make a point here. The example is you come on the air and you say, you're watching the Big Ten on ESPN from the rack in Piscataway, New Jersey. The Iowa Hawkeyes go up against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Welcome, everybody, to the rack with Dale and Cuff. I'm Dave Leno. Dale, in this matchup, features two of the better rebounding and defensive teams in the Big Ten. I'm not asking him a pinpointed question. I'm leading him to where he wants to go, things we talked about. I'm not trying to sound smart. I'm letting the analyst shine there. I would intend, when I go back and watch that, if everything comes out smoothly and coherently and there's no pauses, I would put that in a reel versus me saying, welcome, everybody, with Dale and Cuff. I'm Dave Leno. Rutgers comes in 2-5 on the season. Geo Baker is just a stud, one of the best rebounding guards in the country. On the flip side, Fran McCaffrey is one of the most underrated coaches in the Big Ten. Iowa has this stud in the middle. Not only can he rebound, but he stretches the defense and shoots a good 3-ball. Now, you see, I can go into particular, maybe clean that up a little bit. What sounded better, the long form one or the short version? To me, it was the short version. You might disagree, but that's my take on being shorter with your opens. Donnie will bring you in here for your reaction to this slide and conversation.
Hey, Dave, thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time. I really just wanted to echo what you were saying about shorter and more concise opens.
Please.
I'm a rising junior at Wingate University, and I see a couple of my Wingate friends in here, Sam Hyman and Jalen White. Hey, guys, hope you all are doing well. And I think that's one thing that I've learned as I've gotten to be on the air more and more. That's one thing that I was conscious about when I first got a couple of opportunities, and I thought, I've got to get everything out. I've got to get everything out in the open for everybody to listen to and to be engaged with. But I think the more and more that I was on the air, I started to realize that, as you mentioned, and I'm so happy you did, that the shorter the open, I think the better. And it just gives it more of a flavor, and it doesn't make everybody, I guess, tired from hearing you going on a long-winded tangent. So I appreciate you saying this.
No, I appreciate you commenting about that, Donnie, because I think everybody young in their careers, and you said you're at Wingate and a junior, so I want to ask and get your perspective because you're in college. how did you clean up your opens or when you're about to go on air? So you watch a tape and you say, oh, maybe I was a little bit long there. For those on here that want some tangible evidence, did you just simply, narrow 3 sentences to 1? Did you just focus on one of the teams? How have you gotten better with these shorter opens?
I think that one thing that I've focused on is, as you've mentioned before too, and you mentioned Sean McDonough treating every game like it's the biggest one.
Yeah.
Thinking back to a couple of games that I've called, basketball in particular, I think of the biggest storyline, whether it's a team coming in undefeated in conference, whether it's a team that's fighting for a playoff spot in the postseason tournament. I tend to really just try and focus on that and maybe pose it as a question to my analysts. I might say, so-and-so comes in 29-1, can they be stopped? Or a player that's averaging 25 a game, they've scored double digits every game this season. Is there a chance that could be slowed down? I try and think of one main thing that maybe someone that's tuning in that doesn't have allegiance to one or the other side, they may sit there and think, what's the one reason why I want to watch this game? And hopefully I can bring that to the table, whether I, come on and talk about one team or the other. So I definitely would say trying to focus it into one point that's the main point of the game, the story of the game, if you will.
Donnie, I echo your comments. And that's exactly, I can tell you, you have already got this at a very young age. I can tell you definitively, that's what ESPN says to its talent. Why should I be watching this game? And of course, everybody can have a different opinion about it, but generally, there's a huge storyline coming into a ball game, whether it's Mike Krzyzewski going for his 1,000th win in college basketball, or it's a particular player. You can look at the NBA. When an NBA game gets back going, are we talking about an individual team where they left off in the beginning? Are we talking about how these players are preparing to get back into game action after not playing for a couple of months? So if you can pinpoint it to one or two things and you can categorize them in your rundown and how you want your open to flow naturally, that's the best way to do it. Donnie, excellent points. If you and your Wingate crew have that down, you're well ahead of the game. I appreciate you joining us today, Donnie.
Thank you, Dave.
Yep, thank you. So also, ladies and gentlemen, like reacting to what the viewer is seeing on a live look or during breaking news, I will tell you, and this is what I said about live opens. Sometimes something happens where you're not prepared for. It happens a lot on the bigger productions that you'll do. I can tell you sometimes there might be a point in a broadcast, but we can focus here on the open, where the crowd goes wild because unbeknownst to you, they're showing a famous player coming back to the campus. And there's a pause in the action and the lights are still out and the spotlight is on that specific player. Just off the top of my head, I could say Ryan Arcidiacono, I had a picture of him early on. He's now with the Bulls. He played at Villanova, won 2 titles there. Arch comes back to Villanova. I'm doing a game for FS1. Welcome to the Pavilion. Today, Villanova is taking on Xavier with Bill Raftery. I'm Dave Leno. So-and-so's on the sideline. And then you see, and whether your production says, quickly, after this quick point about, open up the game, we're going to go into a shot moments ago. And, you have to react on the fly. Moments ago, Ryan Arcidiacono stood from his chair. And, however you phrase that, some things like that will happen in your career where a producer will say to you, look at the monitor, see what's happening, react. A lot of this happens in breaking news. For those of you who want to go into news, this happens also in sports. I remember doing a Temple game. Jalen Mills, who's a corner, maybe playing safety for the Philadelphia Eagles, spoke to the team earlier on tonight. I didn't see the package. I didn't see what he said, but the producer said, hey, Dave, coming out of break, tee up. Jalen Mills spoke to the Temple team in the locker room. And then I didn't, sometimes in a break, I can write down something if I want it to be exact. Welcome back to Philadelphia. Temple leading LaSalle by 6 earlier tonight. Eagle safety Jalen Mills spoke to the Temple team. Boom, quick, concise, you go to it. So you'll have to think on your feet sometimes. You might need to scrap out, cross out, X, and open for what's transpiring in front of you. Those scenarios will happen in your career if you decide to go forth along your journey. And if it's something you can keep in mind going forward, where you have the ability to get rid of your notes and just focus on what's happening, very, very important. With your play-by-play opens, so whether you're at ESPN, CBS, Fox, NBC, or you're doing games for free, trying to get some experience. Rehearse, 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 especially if you are young in this business and you have the time and you're a student in school. I would advise getting your production set up, and I know things go wrong. I know wires get unplugged, production fails, someone pulls a wrong cord, everybody's not on the same page and ready to go. I say no excuse. You got to rehearse that material before you're about to go on air. For an ESPN production, sometimes it happens where you just don't have time to rehearse because there are technical difficulties, but I, again, say no excuse. Try to rehearse the open so everybody's on the same page before, especially a live open. Work out the kinks, even if you're pre-taping it. Try to rehearse, plan. And you should talk with your producer or the people, the men and women on your crew. Hey, I'm more comfortable going through this open a few times before I'm ready to go. And you're saying that not because you don't feel like you're ready. It's you want to get it damn right when it actually goes out over the air. And I'm the type of guy that says it's okay to ask to do that. Go forth and try to rehearse and make a plan and say, you don't need to say, if you stumble, it's okay. And, everything else was good. Maybe you just roll with it the next time you try to work on it. But if there's one or two things that you want to get better and you have 20 minutes to go before the game, before your broadcast starts, do the darn thing again. Nobody's good at crack jokes. Nobody shouldn't. Nobody's perfect in the business. So I think communication is key in having everybody on the same page. Your producer, your director, your graphics people, whether it's just you and a guy working a TriCaster and somebody switching or pulling the cable or just shooting you, and it's literally 3 or 4 people on your specific broadcast. Try to do it a few times if you can, especially if you're at the early stages in your career. Chris will get to you in just a moment. But I want you to go over the simple things in a format, and I'll show you some sample rundowns and formats from the Union and ESPN later on in my presentation today. But go over what the open animation's like. And that's the glitz and glamour, like a video package of ESPN with the bouncing basketballs or something to that vein. The title card that says Temple's playing Princeton. And then any sponsored elements. Today's game is brought to you by UPS. What can Brown do for you? And there's a logo of UPS. And you need to know that there's a sales obligation by your network or your team that you need to mention this stuff. Those of you that are younger in your careers, it's kind of cool. I can tell you, I always used to try to bring sponsors in when I did Indiana athletics. I thought it was cool to learn. I know a lot of broadcasters like Joe Buck will say, I hate reading, like, today's first pitch is brought to you by Taco Bell, Live Miles. Like, and then he's like, after the first batter comes up, today's second batter is brought to you. Like, there's a lot, right? But if you can get in some of those things at a young age and navigate cleanly from play-by-play to a sponsor element to interacting with your analyst to back to play, that's a high-level skill that you're mastering. I think we talked about simplifying the open a lot so far. Less is more in the situation. Donnie was perfect in what he said. Why should we be watching this game? So I challenge everybody on here, whether you do play-by-play, and this goes for those of you that do studio and you're ad-libbing, you're not reading from a teleprompter, even if you're doing a stand-up report in the field. Less is more. Give the viewer the most important information and get to your analyst early. I see Nate Ross is on here. Nate and I call it a Penn State Penn game. Nate should be the star of that game. Nate should be explaining the X's and O's. He's a coach. He knows the game inside and out better than I do. Let him explain his opinion about why people should be watching and why you should be focusing on these given players. And what's the most important things to know about this team. If you need to play traffic cop and save all your information for later on in the game when it's appropriate, so be it. And you are the quarterback of the broadcast. Take your pride out of it and just roll with the show. I did a game on ESPNU this past year with Robbie Hummel. Robbie, I believe, is a rising star in the broadcast business. He played at Purdue, one of the top scorers in Purdue basketball history, and in the Big Ten, for my money. And Robbie talked probably 75% of that show, and I talked 25. You might be saying, "Oh my God, he talked 3/4 of the show, and you were the play-by-play guy." Listen, Robbie had a lot to say, and Robbie's information was great. And you know what? I took a step back and I said, I just kept bringing up conversation over the play. It was a lopsided game that we did, a Rutgers Lafayette game. And we talked about things in the Big Ten, his playing days. Still got in a couple play-by-play elements, obviously, to keep viewers attached to the game. But it's okay in those moments. So let the dictate determine how much your analyst talks. Who your analyst is will also be key in that. Let your analyst share with you what he or she wants to talk about on the broadcast. One of the things I do when I'm preparing to work with somebody for the first time, during the week, I'll schedule a call, or if they're too busy, an email, and we'll trade conversations over email, or by text or by phone. What are you looking forward to this game? What players do you want to pay attention to? I think that's really important to get their experience, their expertise, and their knowledge at the forefront rather than yourselves. Going to break, very important to do that smoothly. I can go into more detail on that, but I do want to get Chris in here for a quick comment. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having us as always. I was just going to make a note that I learned early. We often hear we'll fix it in post as kind of a running joke, whether it's radio, TV, or broadcasting. I didn't know it was a joke at first. So one thing I learned from a guy that came in, and to be clear too, you also have to know how much time do you have for a tape to open. If you can throw some darts and redo it, that's good. If they're saying, hey, we need to go, don't do it. But he made a mistake, and the play-by-play guy came in, he completely blew it up. And afterwards, he told me when no one was around, he goes, always blow it up. Because the director or the producer might just run it anyways. If you're not happy, it's your face, it's your voice. Completely blow it up, apologize to them, but make sure it stops because they're just going to run it. And I found that out the hard way, obviously. And then the other thing that I found out too was a lot of these guys on their agenda, they're trying to get an open hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours taped and in the bag.
Yeah.
Which is great. I love having that stuff done, but I was burned several times because we did specific opens and so much can change on players. So we've tried to go to more of, hey, if we're going to focus on this, can we also do a generic one to put in the bag? And most of the directors or producers were happy with doing that because they had free time anyways. We did something specific with keys to games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we ran out some generic ones. And we've had to go to that numerous times because especially in low-level soccer, we found out someone had to work that day in his real job and had to skip the trip down from, Kalamazoo, Michigan. So that's just a couple of things that I've picked up. And then I've been a little more forceful of if it's really that bad, if I messed up that bad, apologizing later, but we got to redo it.
Would you ever consider in a moment where you guys don't know really what open's going to air? Say you're in a production meeting, you're like, hey, let's tape 3 opens. We have an 01 tip. Well, we might have an 05 tip, so we're going to have to have a longer open. We might have a shorter open. Yeah. Why not do it live? Or what is your experience with live opens?
Yeah, I actually prefer live opens. I don't mind. Again, I'm an analyst, so, I mean, we're kind of like the rodeo clowns. But I don't mind it, so I'm good for that. I think the biggest issue has been stadiums where they're like, hey, we're going to do an open at – how do I get up that many flights of stairs?
Right.
But unless we're doing it opens in stadiums. And also on that same point, I've had a lot of directors or producers try to take the easy way out for us saying, hey, do you just want to open in the booth? And I think often as a professional, you need to sit there and go, wait, are they trying to be lazy or are they letting me lazy or is it okay? and then also look at the play-by-play guy and try to hope that you don't put him in a bad spot too. Because, I mean, you don't want to – it's nice to be convenient and easy, but like you're saying before, I mean, treat everything like it's a top-level event. So do the extra work, make the walk down to the field, and do it right if you can.
I would suggest too, and Chris, thank you for your thoughts, sharing that. That's great stuff. It is to do, especially if you're younger, as I'm going back to my PowerPoint here, to do a variety of opens. I mentioned, for those of you that didn't know what I mean by like an 0-1 tip or an 0-3 or 0-5. So let's say you had a 7:00 game and at 7:01, they were going to tip and play. A lot of times, like in broadcast lingo, like a producer will tell, when a play-by-play and an analyst, hey, we got an 0-1 tip. So we really only have maybe like a 50-second to 1 minute open. We got to quickly go on, tee up the analyst for one comment. We're going to go to faces as the players are coming out towards mid-court. They're going to jump it up and we're going to go. We're going to run lineups over play, which is what ESPN's doing. And I think a lot of networks do the same now on those first couple of possessions when a team is coming down the floor. If you can work on that type of open, if you can work on a longer form open, and if you have the ability to do several different ones throughout your season, maybe not on the same show, I'd highly recommend you get that experience. I will tell you, for those that aspire to get to the national level, or maybe just work some bigger games at their company, that I believe that more and more productions and producers and networks will push for the live stuff. I can tell you that, maybe if you're doing like an ESPN3 game, maybe because lights are out, which happens a lot at Temple. If I do like an ESPN3 broadcast, we'll tend to tape it. It's not because nobody thinks they could do it live. I actually rather do it live, but lights go out like right when the show starts. They don't want to come up on black. Some productions do, but other producers have different opinions on that. So they rather tape it 15 to a half hour out and just get it in the bag. And if the producer wants to do that, that's fine. But I would suggest that if your producer says to you, hey, Jill, Joe, Tom, do you guys want to do it live? Yeah. Can we rehearse? And then I would respond, do you mind if can we rehearse it maybe a couple times? Sure. Hey, we only have time for one rehearsal. That's happened to me. And you know what? You capture the atmosphere. You get people behind you screaming and cheering, or you hear the crowd, even if it's not a packed house. I'd highly recommend, especially if you're younger in your career and there's not that many eyeballs on you, I challenge you, do a live open. Do a stand-up as if you're acting, a live report like you would see a man or a woman on the street on your local news channel. And be strong going to break. Coming up next, the tip between the Owls and the Mustangs on ESPN. Be strong, be authoritative with the message. Bring people back. Coming up next, the 39-0 SMU Mustangs look for their 40th win on the other side. Something to that theme, to draw people back, tease them for the next part of your broadcast. A couple points about being in studio. So for those of you that work in your athletics department, that do some studio shows, coaches shows, for those of you in student media in college, for those of you out of school that maybe work at a news station or for a team and you do stuff at a desk, happy to have you chime in on this portion. In the studio, which I do a lot with my Philadelphia Union job and also with the New York Riptide, where we do some of our games at the studio as well. I think those of you know at the Philadelphia Union and a lot of MLS teams, they don't really travel on the road except for a handful of teams. So they're calling the games in the studio, and at home they're doing them at the venues, which obviously in the post-pandemic world or current pandemic world, that's going to change, right? So important to note, just some elementary things that I think people, including myself, sometimes forget. Sitting up straight, having good posture in the studio, shoulders back. You're probably laughing and saying, why do I need to know this? I'm telling you right now, when you're in the studio or if you're looking at a monitor and it's comfortable like me, sitting like this with my shoulders slouched. And when you're at a restaurant with your buddies, you're at the bar, you're like this with your elbows on the bar. I totally get it. And you seem like it's conversational, it's gathering, it's like a fireside chat. Even if it hurts your back, you want to have good posture, have that commanding, authoritative presence when you're on TV. I mentioned starting this presentation today that television is a visual medium. If you come on the air looking disheveled, looking like you don't want to be there, bent over, hunched over, it's not going to look good for you and your production. You're there for the team. You're there for yourself as well. Make yourself look good, okay? That goes with dressing the part. I don't think I need to go into too much detail about that. But if you are in the studio, do you need to wear a full suit? Do you need to wear, a dress, head to toe? No, that's up to you. I do. That's just my style. Sometimes I'll wear suit sneakers. Sometimes, on a hot summer day, you're in the studio. I've known some people that will wear shorts and flip-flops. I've seen anchors do that at soccer stadiums where it's just not my style, and that's not wrong. If they know they're not going to be shown on camera and it's business up top, party at the bottom, so be it. But I know that I'm walking around the press box. I'm walking around the stadium. People are seeing me when I'm not on camera. And I want an image to be portrayed to everybody that I'm a professional and I take my job seriously. Some of you may know me from my days in Indiana. Some of you may know me from my early starts in broadcast. And I was always the type of guy who dressed. I'm not saying I looked perfect every time, but I dressed up for the job, even on some of the smaller gigs I've had where I didn't need to dress. And I'm not saying you need to wear a full suit if you're doing a radio broadcast. Sometimes I wore, a nice sweater, khakis, and some nice shoes. Other times I dressed maybe more a little bit, higher up the chain, I guess I would say, with a suit. So understand who you might see off air. Maybe you'll meet a contact. Maybe a network executive will be there. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a booth and I see a Fox executive, ESPN executive, and they're not there for me, of course, but I was there. I can't tell you how many times I've walked around at the US Open. I wasn't dressed in the suit because it's hot and you're outside in New York and you're working long hours, but I can't tell you how many ESPN executives I saw. Then you never know who you're going to meet. So just something to keep in mind for those of you that are younger. I wore sweats going to a studio for Japanese baseball because I knew at 3 o'clock in the morning, there was nobody there except myself, the guy switching the board, who was never going to offer me a job. At least I thought so, which he or she didn't in the future, I guess present time now. And the office wasn't there by the time I left, people in the office. So know your time and place, know when you should dress up. Sounds simple, but something to definitely keep in mind as you advance in your career. Trying not to rush under a time crunch. Very important one to master at a young age. Oftentimes, I found myself where a producer will count down 10, 9, 8. I've scripted down where I'm not on camera and it's a wide shot, or if it's a player up, and maybe I scripted something like they're showing a shot of Alejandro Bedoya that plays for the Union. There's a look at Alejandro Bedoya as 10 assists on the year, one of the best two-way players in MLS. We'll speak to Bedoya on the other side. I have that scripted in front of me, but the producer's counting down 10, 9, 8. And there's not enough time to say those two sentences. So you have to, about thinking on your feet, ad-libbing, working off the fly. And I've gotten more comfortable about doing this over time in my career. Saying, Bedoya warming up against the Red Bulls. We'll chat with Allie after this. So there's just some little phrases after this on the other side coming up next that are not crutch words, but they'll get me to a place in a shorter time frame. We talked about the less is more. I can't tell you how many times that I've been told by a producer, hey, we got to go to break quickly. We got to go now. And sometimes they cut you off. And I hate that. It's one of my big pet peeves when I watch a broadcast and it's not really the producer's fault. It's not sometimes really my fault. It's master control, just taking a commercial before the producer or the assistant director says, all right, roll your break. And they just cut off. And I can't stand it because it looks like on TV that I did not stop talking when the producers had stopped, but it wasn't me. It was the satellite people. Important to hit that break early when you can. And if you can get to break smoother, if you can get to your toss quicker, more polish. I'm telling you, that will help you, and it would be more on your more prone to including on a demo reel for those of you younger trying to move up in your careers. Visit the studio when you're not on the air. Go in a couple days before, the day before, the morning of, especially if you're in college or if you go into town early and you want to see your broadcast position. Ask the crew how many monitors are going to be available. Is the monitor in my desk like a Plus Studio? Is it going to be at a 32-inch monitor like I would have at my house that's sitting on the base of a camera on the floor of the studio? Or am I going to have 3 large 50-inch plasma 4K TVs, and they're going to show exactly what people are seeing at home? Or one's going to be an ISO monitor, which producers, we talked about that last week, which a producer can show you graphics that doesn't roll over on the air, but they'll show you to get yourself ready for it. So important to be aware of your surroundings. Make sure you hear yourself, obviously. Make sure your equipment works. I never like to roll onto set 5 minutes before I'm about to go on air. I'm not going to say that hasn't happened. Sometimes I'm doing last minute prep, or I have to interview someone and I have to get, like Chris said, going from the stadium to the set. And it's far away from the field to your booth. And you got to get up and do your live open. Sometimes that happens, but make sure everything works. I've been a part of broadcasts where equipment has failed, and you just got to roll with the punches and say to your stage manager or somebody helping you with the broadcast, hey, I have no IFB. Just give me a hand signal. Give me like a 30-second, do this C for 30 seconds. Give me a 10 seconds, 5, and do this to tell me to get the hell out to go a commercial, because I cannot hear the producer. Or point to the monitor when I know to be looking at the monitor, or point to the camera. They'll do this, looking at the camera to show you're on camera. Those are some advanced things for those of you that are part of some broadcasts that stage managers, a man or a woman, can help you with a bigger production. A big one too is a lot of people sometimes say to me, I can't read my spotting boards, my notes. I write so small, I can't read. I write in pencil, I get to the stadium, it rains, and my notes washed away. Make sure that you categorize your notes and read them. Make sure they're legible for game day. Everybody has their own system. I don't need to go into how to form spotting boards because that's a personal preference. I think many of you know I color code mine, I handwrite it. Sometimes I do things typed up, but pretty much I handwrite my notes to ascertain the information. Understand, and I put this in red, understand when's the right time to engage the camera, look at your analyst or co-anchor, or to look down at your notes when there's video. There's a lot of different opinions on this. I found that the better opens are when I welcome everybody looking into the camera, and this is when I'm doing play-by-play or at the studio, and then I ask my analyst a question. I look at my analyst and I listen to the analyst. I don't go back and tilt my head to the camera and give a fake smile. There's several broadcasters out there that do that, and that's what works for them, and they're way higher in the totem pole, so maybe I'm not doing something right. But when I go back and watch my work, and maybe you'll do this with your work, if you're on camera and you're doing an open with an analyst, if you're looking at your analyst the whole time when they're talking, hopefully they're not talking for like a minute and it's a quick, 1 or 2 points going back to you, and then you look back at the camera when you're making a point, that tends to be a better visual for the people at home. And I would suggest, instead of keeping your head on a swivel, welcome to today's broadcast with Sean Smith. I'm Dave Leno. Sean, this matchup features 2 of the better shooting teams in the conference. I'm looking at the analyst the whole time until he's done. I look back into the camera and I go on with my next point. Our Taco Bell drive for success. Take a look at this point guard, shooting guard combination. I think you know where I'm going there. So it's important to learn, and you understand this by watching your work over time. Very important. The ability to think on your feet and react to what people are seeing at home is important. And I'm going to lastly end this slide with one tidbit that I got from a coordinating producer. Comment when appropriate, and if you have time, on what your analyst said. What do I mean? You're talk about you're setting up a soccer game. The Union today are playing the New York Red Bulls with Tommy Smith. I'm Dave Leno. Marissa Pilla's on the sideline. Tommy, the Union today go up against one of the best pressing teams in MLS. Or Tommy, how did the Union handle the most lethal press in the league? Tommy gives his point. You're right, Tommy. They tend to get 2 or 3 guys around the ball. And to combat that, one of the rising stars. Now, did you see how I tagged it? I commented on his point. Sometimes something will come to mind, sometime it won't. It's an advanced thing where I need to get better at. And I think all of us, when you do an open or an on camera or a natural reaction, if you're not having a scripted show like a newscast, if you can comment quickly, concisely, succinctly on somebody's point, that will help you. And I'm telling you, your producers will love it. It shows chemistry. It shows you guys know what you're talking about, and people will love the interaction at home. It's something that I'm constantly trying to work on. What makes a great stand-up? Delivery, knowledge, and confidence. Know when your producer and director is going to come to you, when you're a sideline reporter, when you're about to do the open. The communication is key. Going into a broadcast, whether you're a sideline person for your athletics department or student media organization, whether you're working for the Big Ten Network, ESPN, or you're working for your athletic department, understand your role, understand when you're about to on camera and how you're going to be on camera. It seems simple, but maybe there's no IFB. And maybe those of you, maybe there's just the camera guy. I know, and I bet you some of you on here that maybe are cameramen or camera women know this. The camera person will just point to you and say, go, Johnny. And you don't hear what the play-by-play and the analyst are saying. You have to talk these things through. But what makes a great stand-up? Having an authoritative presence, being confident in your work, being smooth in your delivery. That less is more. Simple in your words. What does the viewer need to know right off the bat? What can captivate an audience? If you're taping a stand-up, my opinion, do a 3-2-1 count for post-editing reasons. So, all right, Dave, stand up for this Indiana-Iowa game in 3, 2, 1. Here at Assembly Hall, Indiana lost 69-45 to the Iowa Hawkeyes, and you go through your thing. That will help you when to go, because sometimes I've learned when you just roll into it and when you're trying to look at your material back in post, if you're sitting in your student media lab or at home when you're on your laptop or in the library, you tend to have a hard time finding your material. If you have the liberty to do your stand-up 15 times, do a 3-2-1 count. If you're doing it live, like Tony Perkins said, I agree. Donnie mentioned this. Ari mentioned this as well. Sam also hit on this. Collect yourself. That less is more. Think about the things you want to say. Don't put 15 thoughts in your head. Think about those 1 or 2, 3 things that you want to mention before you go to the bulk of your story. Having a lot of energy is key, everybody. Especially that I've done so many stand-ups in my career in empty stadiums after games when I was younger. Even when I do pregame shows with nobody there, having that energy, that confidence, that passion when fans are coming in, but the seating bowl behind me is empty. But I'm treating it like it was a sold-out 18,000-seat stadium. And we'll have to have that attitude coming out over the air, especially if we go back to broadcasting games without fans in the stands. So you need to have that same energy for a pre-tape stand-up versus going live. If you need to do multiple takes, do it. Even if you think you have the first one in the can, don't just leave and pack up. Try to work on it some more. When's the right time to do an interactive stand-up? So this is more maybe news. You can say this is sports too, but I think you all know where I'm going for. When you're in the field and you're looking at wreckage from maybe a burned down building, or it's a cool feature story and you have a prop in your hand. Maybe it's a trophy or a basketball with a lot of signatures on, and you're holding that up. If it's something to drive the story, use it. But I would suggest don't just show yourself on camera just to put a stand-up in your package. Some of my better packages for news or a sports story have been without the talent and the announcers in there. You don't need that. If you feel like you need a bridge to get you to point A to point B, put yourself in there. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation here. Grabbing an interview live during a stand-up, that's happened to me multiple times, and having your guest stand by. Making him or her or a group of people aware what's going on. Hey, John, I'm going to get to you in about 5 minutes. We have you planned on after Steve does the weather. And you can, and as you're listening to the broadcast, you can say to your guest, we're about 1 minute away, and you're going to come and just stand by. He or she might be off to conversing with somebody else. Important to get your guest ready. And also be cognizant of if your guest says something that's inappropriate or off color. How do you clean up from that? I think I've told you some stories about some expletives have been said during a broadcast. Yeah, we thought it was funny. We couldn't believe that it got out over air. I had to quickly gather myself. I came back on camera, no smiles, and I apologized. And what did I do? I apologized quickly on behalf of the production, and I went right to the next point. I said, I'm really sorry about that. What do you think about this part of the game? And I went right into it. And people comment to me, you know, that was really professional, how you handled that situation. Mic flags, very important to show your logo out there. Sometimes, you know, you might not be thinking of, you don't want the ABC, your ABC logo is, it's pointed at the, you know, the fringe from all the sides connecting versus the logo, but make sure you get your logo proud there, whether it's your school, your network, your team, your company. Make sure people can see your network, and don't grab the mic so tightly. Relax. Just chill out and have fun with it. I know a lot of younger people hold the mic really close. They grab it tight because they're nervous. Hold it. Just be natural. Take a deep breath. And I know it's easier said than done, but practice in front of the mirror with a brush. Practice with a coffee cup. And just relax. I can't tell you how many times, and I'm not afraid to say this publicly, still to this day, that I practice like I'm holding, you know, a brush or, you know, a coffee cup or something else. Or I'm in the car holding a pen and I'm working on a mock broadcast. I still do it to this day. I have fun. I love this, and I want to get better. So constantly work on that. Jackie wants to chime in. Let's go right to Jackie here. Hey, Jackie.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thank you so much for doing this again.
You're so welcome. Go ahead.
So one thing that I was taught as far as the mic goes, and if somebody didn't tell me this, then I would have been not doing it wrong, I guess you could say, in quotes. So like I would, you know, you hold the mic, whatever, like this. She told me, like, tuck your thumb up, because a lot of times you see broadcasters are holding it like this and your thumb is sticking like straight out and it doesn't look great. So when she told me do it like this, like my mind was blown. I don't know why I ever thought, and I never held it like this, but you know, I was less like sure to put it up there. And I just, now that's what I notice first. If I'm watching a game or if I'm watching the news and I see any reporter, I'm like, oh my gosh, she could look
Why is
so
their
much
thumb
better.
like they're playing a thumb war, right?
Yeah, it's like you can see the tip of their thumb. And I never noticed it, but once this person told me about, you know, hey, tuck your thumb, they were looking at my demo reel and say, you know, this is one thing that, hey, be mindful of this, tuck your thumb. And I never thought of it myself. And my mind just was blown. And I feel like it just changed the way that I hold the microphone and present myself on camera. And I feel like everybody should know that.
So what do you do? And I commented on this a couple of slides ago, but I'm curious to get your opinion while we have you. What do you do with your offhand? Do you hold notes? Do you put it in your pocket? Do you just keep it out and just, I mean, I'll talk about this later, but I don't like to, you know, wave my arm side to side. What do you do with the hand that's not working, I guess?
I like to hold note cards.
Okay. Yeah.
Not usually a notebook, like not a small index card, like the bigger, like 5x7 index cards. I tend to use those and fill one side just so I can shuffle them easily if I need more than one surface, which usually you do. So, because I'm very visual, I'm Italian, and my sister-in-law is deaf, so I'm used to using my hands for a lot of things. So if I don't have my hands full, I'm afraid that they'll be all over the place. So I feel more comfortable, honestly, holding something. If I don't have notes, I'll hold a pen. I'll hold something, a hockey puck. I don't know. I'll just hold something. Maybe I have to do a giveaway to somebody on screen or whatever. Whatever the shot is, I always have something in my other hand.
No, that's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing
Yeah.
that advice and those tips, Jackie. I really appreciate it.
You're
I didn't know
welcome.
that about the thumb.
My mind was blown, and
Yeah.
now it's the first thing I look at, and I'm like, they could look so much better if their thumb was tucked. And
What?
sometimes on national broadcasts as well. And the person who told me, she's like, this could hinder sometimes if they're looking at your reel and they see that, it's like off done, like you're out of consideration. And I'm like, oh, it must be, opinion based on the hiring manager or director, because I see it happen on national broadcasts as well. And I'm just like, no, fix this. It could look so much better.
I love it. I truthfully didn't know that. And I will now be cognizant of that moving forward. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh,
Thanks for being here today. Let's go with the coach, my friend Nate Ross. Hey, Nate.
Dave, how's everybody doing? Thanks for doing this again. When you were talking about the mic flags, my brain just started laughing because when I was doing this very early in my career, I was a sideline reporter for basketball. And I remember one of the first games I ever did. In my ear, I hear 30 seconds, Nate, we're coming to you. And as I'm getting my thoughts together, the A2, one of the audio guys, comes running at me. And he grabs the microphone. And he's like wrestling with me. And I realized the mic flag is upside down.
Oh.
And I didn't know it at the time. And every time I see him now, we crack up because he thought about that. But while he is taking the microphone apart, flipping the microphone over, in my ear, I'm hearing 4, 3. And when he came to me, he had just snapped it together and handed it to me. But the reason I'm bringing that up is, it's funny now, at the time it wasn't. But somebody told me 2 things once when I first started in this business. Number 1, you better buy yourself a fireman's hat because you always are going to put out fires. Mm-hmm. They might be big ones, they might be little ones. And the other thing is, the best advice I ever got was, when that little red light comes on, if you're a guy, think of the most beautiful woman you've ever met. If you're a woman, think of the best looking guy you ever met and talk to that person. Mm-hmm. Simple. The light comes on, talk to that person. And that was the best advice I ever got. That was many, many years ago. And the last thing I thought of is, when you are interviewing someone, for some reason, sometimes they want to start moving. So what I always do is get them on my right side, hold the microphone in my left hand, and put my arm around them. For 2 reasons. 1, I can hold them. And 2, while the camera's on them, the notes are in my right hand, and I can look down like I'm looking at them, but I'm looking at my notes behind their back. That's like if I'm interviewing a player, I can look down and see he had 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 assists, which might get out of my head while he's answering the question I first asked him. And he's not, especially if it's a kid, a player, they don't know stand close to you if it's a one shot. So you can grab them by the shirt. They're not going anywhere. You got the microphone in one hand, you got your arm around them on the other hand. It drives me nuts when a person puts the person they're interviewing on their right and holds the microphone in their right hand. Right. They have no control over that person if they want to start moving. And sometimes they want to start moving.
Yeah.
So that's a couple things that I have learned the hard way over the years.
No, that's wonderful. And while we have you, I want to get your perspective on the play-by-play versus analyst dynamic. There's a lot of play-by-play announcers watching this live and maybe watching this on replay. For those of us that are younger in the business, what to you stands out when you're working with the play-by-play, whether it's a male or female or crew, that makes the most smooth, polished opens where you go back and you watch it that night or the next day and you say, wow, we came out really strong on this broadcast. It was dynamite. I wish we did that again on the next show. What stands out to you on a production when you guys start off so well?
Well, you and I are in the same position on a totem pole where somebody said to me last week, well, who's your play-by-play guy? I said, whoever shows up.
Right.
Not the same one every game.
Right.
But I remember when you and I did that Penn State game, we talked before.
Yeah.
And if you don't talk a couple of days before and you don't know, if you know the guy, it's easy because you've done games with him. Like I do a lot of Coastal Carolina games now with the same person. So we even drive up together sometimes, or if we don't, an hour before he'll say, well, what do you want to talk about in the open? And somebody that meant a lot to my career, and I would never be where I am without them, the late Dan Shoemaker from ESPN, always told us, when you do the open, give them a reason to watch. What's the reason they should watch this game? And you've said it many times. But talk to the guy. For one, you get their personality a little bit. And a lot of times you have 45 seconds to say 100 things. Don't say 100 things. Say one thing.
Yeah.
Give them a reason to watch. You got 2 hours to tell them the rest of the stuff.
Right.
But just talk to the person and you get their personality, they get yours. And they're teeing you up for the open. Because like I said, you got 45 seconds, maybe 50 seconds. And the way broadcasts are now, it's more that than the 05 opens. They don't happen anymore. Because everything's a 2-hour window, so you get 50 seconds to a minute to do your thing, start the game, and hopefully it's over in 2 hours. So the next game, you don't join with 18 to go in the first half.
No, for sure. I just found that, right, you have to have those conversations. And you and I both work with people that we don't know personally, and sometimes it's hard to get a hold of people too, whether it's a producer or a play-by-play or an analyst. They're busy. They have their own lives, and you just try to talk, even if it's a simple, meeting or you're chatting over, dinner before the broadcast. I think what Nate says is important, that communication. Amber, it seems like you want to chime in here. So I will ask you to unmute yourself and come on. Amber, I think she might have something to say, or Nate, she might have something to say based on your point. So let's go to Amber.
I have a question for you, Nate, if you don't mind, Dave, if I ask him a question.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I am working on, I really do a lot of sports information when I do my live video. I do a lot of sports information, but I have been working on some color analysis as well. I'll watch a Oklahoma City Thunder game, and I'm doing some freelance work right now for the Unwrapped Sports Network, and I do color analysis for the Thunder games. People can see me, so it's kind of like it's just raw footage. I'm not dressed up. I might have on my Thunder shirt and something like that, or my Sports Network shirt to show that I'm representing my sports network and representing my team at the same time. So I'm working towards trying to get on air to do some things with color analysis with football and basketball, actually. So what are some things that I could work on being a beginner color analysis? What's some things I need to work on?
Every ESPN conference call I was ever on, they say the same thing to the analysts. We're paying you for your opinion. Give me your opinion. That's what they're paying you for. They want to hear what you think. I always say, when I explain to people what I do, first I say, do you know who Dick Vitale is? If they say yes, I say, well, we go to the same barber, and that's what I do. But if they don't know who Dick Vitale is, I tell them the play-by-play guy tells you what happens. I tell you why it happens. So it's just, and I'll bet if I would have been paid for every game I watched at home and was the analyst, I'd be a millionaire today before I ever got a job. So just practice doing that and tell people why what just happened. And the other thing is, don't tell them what they can see. If they can see the pass went from the point guard to John Williams on the wing, don't tell them that. They can see that. Tell them why it happened. Or if a big man hedges on a screen, don't say, well, he hedged on the screen. They can see that. Tell them why he hedged on the screen. It's more the why, what they just saw happen, than what happened. And one other thing I'll tell you, I learned a valuable lesson this year. About 9 years ago, for some reason, I don't know why, I wore a bow tie instead of a regular tie. And I got a text from a gentleman in Bristol, Tennessee at ESPN who I've known for years. And he said, nice bow tie. So like Dave says, it's very true. You never know who's watching. Every game since that day, I've worn a bow tie. And I did a game this year for Sirius XM, the finals of a tournament on radio. And I go into the gym, I had a sport coat on, I did not wear a tie. And I'll bet 4 people said to me, Nate, good to see you, where's the bow tie? So I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
But it's just, like Dave says, you're overdressing. No, you're not. Because people know me, 1, because I don't have any hair, and 2, because of the bow tie now. So whatever it takes, I'll do it to get recognized. But the important thing is tell them why they're seeing what they're seeing. And give them your opinion. That's what they want to hear.
Thank you for answering my question. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and if you ever have any questions, my Twitter handle is crazy because people get nuts. It's HUPNLSTN8, Hoop Analyst Nate. But if you just go Nate Ross, you'll find it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Amber, and thanks, Nate, for sharing that. That's all great stuff. I see Shawnee Hill, who I've worked with in the past. He's a terrific announcer as well. There's a lot of PA and also production work. And he said, to build off Nate's point, you see it in the chat, that's especially a good technique if they're going to play your interview live over the in-house PA. I think Shawnee's referring to where Nate say where he's being closer, maybe hugging the analyst or holding them. I think you all know what I mean there. You have an IFB in, but the interviewee may not. The natural reaction is to back away from the mic because they think they are too loud because it's coming over the PA. I think, Shawnee, that's an excellent point that you bring up. So you'll keep your guests close. You know what's going on, and they probably do not. So again, the slide ends with, being smooth, going from one topic to the next. How do you be smooth? Be short, succinct, know how to get to point A to point B without some awkward pauses, without ums, without likes. Know where you're going. Rehearse. If you have the opportunity to look down when you're not on camera and read from your notes, so be it. If you go from one package to one player to the next, and if you come up with bullet points, it's okay to look down. Everybody does it. I built this slide for those of you that are watching this live, or for those of you on the replay are in college. And I wanted to highlight some things that I've mentioned on some previous Zooms that I think are very important on today's presentation. And that is, if you are a college reporter, you work for your student TV station, radio, you're interning for an outlet, make sure that you know all the resources at your disposal, especially when you're in college. Having the best equipment available to you, cameras, mics, lighting, batteries. You don't have to pay for this. You are essentially paying for it because you go to school there. So you go to your journalism school, you go into the lab, rent this equipment to better your product that you could send to potential employers. I think it's very important that a lot of people think, oh my God, I'm just going to shoot this stand-up on my iPhone and that will suffice. If you're in college and you can get all this cool equipment, use it. When you're at an event, especially because you're not on a deadline, let's say you go and do a basketball game like Nate said at Coastal Carolina, or where I went, Indiana, or at USC. I'd recommend doing as many different stand-ups as you can for your broadcast. And when you go into editing, you will have a lot of different stand-ups at your disposal to choose from. Like I said on a couple slides before, don't just do one stand-up, say, oh, that was great, and I'm out of here. I'm going to a college party and I'm going to hang out with friends. If you're there and you want to take your job seriously to prepare yourself for the next level, try to do multiple versions of your stand-up. Try to be more smooth. If you can do it 5 times in a row and you do it perfectly, or if it's 2 times in a row, whenever you're comfortable to move on, I would advise taking some time to work on your craft. You're not on deadline. I mentioned that. You're not doing a look live. Ask fellow students to help you edit your work. Call John or Susie over in the TV station. Say, hey, can you look at this package? Tell me what you think. It might be their personality to just say, hey, that's great. It might be somebody else's personality to say, hey, you might want to fine tune this, or show it to your college professor, who's someone that might not be involved with your TV production, but might take an interest in helping you further your career. I think this is important. When at a game, I know a lot of college reporters have to do this. You're filming each other's stand-up. Help each other out. If it's my turn to be on camera and then it's Steve's turn and I'm doing the camera and he's the reporter, watch each other through the lens, not necessarily in person unless you're seeing their appearance, but look at them through the camera lens or through the, the screen, on the screen, and see what they look like, how they sound, how they look, and help each other out. Coach them live. It is okay to help each other out. You guys are peers in college. I'm going to tell you something that I think a lot of people don't do, and that's what's bolded here. Perform a live report amid a crowd. During a game, go down near the court, or if you can't do that because of security, which might happen if those of you that go to a big school and there's restrictions, go to your media section. Go near the student section where people are screaming, jeering. Someone might be saying some bad words. Someone might be yelling at the refs. There's a lot of organized chaos. There's fans trying to get to their seats. Do a mock stand-up that's just for you. And you can put on your YouTube, put on your reel. Because that is simulating what a sideline reporter or an analyst might do during a bigger broadcast. And I can't tell you how many times I've been on shows where there's people screaming, because of famous players walking by. I've interviewed a famous player. They're not screaming for me, trust me, but they want the autograph of that player when they come off the set. So they're going crazy as soon as that player's getting ready to go off and I'm throwing a break. I can't be caught up in the madness. So when you're in college, and I don't see a lot of students doing this. I did it only a few times when I was at Indiana. I look back on that and said, that was pretty hard to do. I'm not saying it was some of my best work, but I will tell you, it can lay the foundation for a look live if you ever work in affiliated TV for an ABC, NBC, CBS affiliate in a television market in the States. Do a look live, say, thanks, Tom. We're at the game tonight where Temple will take on Tulsa, and you give maybe a couple points. Like think like you're doing like the 6:30 news and it's the sports block and they're coming to you. I think it's something a lot of people don't think about. And just something I want to throw out to you as some of you in college are going back to school in the fall. Be seen. I can tell you that I was the guy that went to practices, as many as I could in between classes and all that, and as I was allowed to go to. And go to some of the Olympic sports, because that's where you'll get a lot of the awesome access and probably some dynamite material that you can use for a broadcast versus a men's basketball or women's basketball team not letting you in their practice. Or the same thing with the football team. The gates might be closed to the stadium. But if you can go to the field hockey, the soccer, the volleyball, they would love the coverage if you're a student reporter. Say to the coach, tell the media relations person, I want to come watch you guys practice. Can I come watch practice for the first half hour, 45 minutes? If I can grab coach before practice, awesome. If I can't, no problem. Even if you're seen and you don't talk to anybody, you will gain respect, especially if you're the only person there. I can't tell you how many times I did it. I traveled my junior and senior year with the volleyball and softball teams at Indiana. I'm not going to say I went to every softball broadcast or game when I was a freshman or a sophomore, but how I got those gigs was volleyball knew that I was a go-getter and that I was very involved with Indiana athletics and around Indiana media all across campus. And they wanted to hire somebody who was a student to travel with the team. And I did, an okay job with volleyball. The softball coach heard me, and I got the softball gig at Indiana. And she saw that I went to all these practices, that I helped them shag balls in practice, that I treated everybody with respect, and I was professional. I wasn't going to get those gigs to be friends with the players. I was there to be a professional broadcaster, even though I was in 18 to 22 range. So if you can conduct yourself professionally and understand you're there for work. Not everybody's going to be your friend, and you want the gear and just to hang out and travel to all these cool places. Act like you've made it big time, like you've gone to a CBS, an NBC, or a Fox. Dress for those games. I used to wear suits all the time in Indiana, even when probably nobody was watching my stuff other than parents. So I would definitely, like Nate said, dress up, even if you're in college. And again, it doesn't need to be expensive stuff. That's not what we're saying here. The media relations staff is there to help you. A lot of my friends I have work in athletic department staffs. They tell me some stories that they can tell instantly when students are go-getters and students are just there just to goof off, get the free food, which is nice. Of course, you should go eat, have fun, mingle with the media. I'm not saying don't do that, but show them that you're there to work on your craft. A lot of times after a basketball game, the media relations people will go back courtside and type up their stories, and there'll be like 3 or 4 of them, or they'll be working in the press box in the football game. You might be the last person in the gym. I've been many times in storied Assembly Hall by myself as the last person to leave a game. And probably 20 people were seeing the report I was going to file for the TV station that I was going to do. I'd go back to the radio station instead of going to a party or doing this or doing that. And I would edit that package till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning by myself in a studio. It's not depressing at all. I loved it and would still do it to this day. And I'm not saying you need to make those sacrifices. I think you have to have that work-life balance. But to prepare yourself for the real world, I would advise, show the media relations staff that you care. Ask questions. Allow them to help you. If you need help shooting a story, that might not be their job. Be honest with them. Say, hey, my video guy has to go. He's a student. Do you mind just facilitating me for a couple of minutes? They might say no. It's worth the ask. Or say, hey, I have a question on this particular stat that came up in the game. Is this accurate? Ask those questions. They'll remember you for it. Trust me. And connect with other people in the media relations staff and also in sports media in those media rooms, whether it's people like Nate, whether it's people like myself, whether it's a friend in the business that's at your same college, whether it's the visiting media crew. I'm not saying you need to be friends with everybody, but get to know them over time and let those relationships evolve organically. You never know when he or she may help you out in the future. Believe me, it happens. You cannot fake chemistry when you're on the set. Some of you may think that you show up, you just do the game, you're happy to do it, you might not like the guy or girl you're working with. I think the audience, in my mind, can tell instantly, at least when they show you on camera or listening, whether you guys got it or no. And how you go from one topic to the next, you have to feel out your analysts. There's some analysts I've worked with that are so easygoing. There's other analysts that simply want to have their own agenda, talk about what they want to discuss, and that's it. If you bring anything out from left field, they're not going to have it. You have to work with both extremes in this business. Prepare yourself for all those cases because it will happen in your career. You will work with people that are not the most friendly and are just there to simply get a paycheck and leave. That's not the way I go about the business. That's not the way I would advise you to go about this industry. But understand there are people like that out there. So if you can explain to him and her, hey, I would feel more comfortable, can we rehearse our open, even though he or she might not want to spend time on it, and say, let's just do it live. Say, to better the show, I would love to just go over this one time if you don't mind, and keep hammering that point home. Or if you can connect with them on a different level, talk about things other than the game, that might help you too. Share that information with one another so you know what your analyst or your co-host is going to say over the course of your show. That's very important. Don't feel like you're stealing or taking people's information. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a set where Marissa and I will have the same note. And I'm like, no, Marissa, you go for it. I can tag it. If it's something you don't say on air, I can say this part. And we'll talk about that to better the show, not ourselves. Okay? Very important. So have that meeting, pre-production. Talk about what you want to bring up on a live broadcast. And sometimes things are going to happen live that you weren't prepared for, and you got to be ready to cover for one another. that happens too. The body language, how you dress, smiling at each other. I found, just the way I go about this, there might be some different opinions out there, that when I'm on set and my, whether it's a guest, a co-anchor, and I told you this for how I feel when I'm doing an open for like an ESPN or for the Union or the Riptide, I tend to look at the person when they're speaking. If it's a long time, yeah, maybe I might engage the camera back and forth. But I don't like to keep my head, as I told you maybe 10 minutes ago, on a swivel. I like to look at the person, and that's telling the viewer, hey, we should be focused on him or her and what they have to say. I think that's crucial when you have chemistry there. Also, recognition of your partner's work. And I mentioned about this advanced thing a few slides ago, about following up on someone's point, continuing the conversation. If your producer says, hey, we have another minute here, and you could say, Adam, that was a great point, and here's why. When you watch that broadcast back, I'm telling you, that will sound so good to your audience at home, or to expound upon points. I think that's crucial. Or reacting to a segment. You know, you're laughing out of a funny shot that's coming out of a player or a coach, or a player was irate in the locker room, and he took the trash can, he threw it against the lockers, and you come back on camera. Do you just move on to the next topic? No, you might react, and you might react how someone will react at home. A lot going on in the locker room, Jim. On to the next story. Like it's like a funny comment without trying to be funny, but you're acknowledging what happened. So that's called a tag, for those of you that don't know that. So it's just simply following up, piggybacking, whatever words you want to use there, to just put a conclusion or a concluding thought on that item. Wanted to go into more detail here about a sample rundown. I'm going to show you one from my Philadelphia Union pregame show from this year. I believe this was our first broadcast before the season was halted due to the pandemic. Here's a sample A block of a pregame show. I want a couple things I want to point out to everybody. Look at the top middle where it says Union Pre-Kick Live presented by Harris. And further down it says pre-show meeting 3:30. Look at the on-air time above that, 5:30. So our producer wants us there 2 hours before. We're going live on the air at 5:30. I told you how much communication is important in this business. I'm comfortable, and the production is comfortable, getting there early to talk about this format and this rundown. Yes, we can talk about it during the week, but we're also going to hash out the details and the final points in a meeting when we're all sitting around the lunchroom of 6ABC in Philly or in the Philadelphia Union Stadium. And we're talking about these things. A couple things on this rundown. And now producers' rundowns are going to look different to everybody. I'm just giving you some sample ones. I have two to share with you today. On this rundown, you see the words. So if you see page one, so our producer goes by, just numerical order here on the different things. So he's going to run this MLS 25th season open. That's going to run all the way to the right, 1:15, TRT, total run time. And it's a SOT, sound on tape. So I'm not saying anything. I'm on the set. When we're live at 5:30, this is the first thing that goes on air. After that SOT, you see it says on camera, hi there, and we're talking about the 11th season of Union Soccer. I know I'm on camera. My producer knows me well. He doesn't need to script me things. I know, welcome to a new season of Philadelphia Union Soccer alongside Sebastian Latou and Adam Can. I'm Dave Leno. It's the 25th season of MLS. Blah, blah, blah. I know that I'm going to go through these things about the season, how we got here from last year, what the offseason looked like. I'm going through these topics. Now, my producer, and it depends on who you work with, is not going to say, okay, move on to the next point, unless I'm dragging. I'm steering the conversation, and we're talking about how much time we want to spend on each thing. If there's graphics, you see where it says GFX in the top right? Those are elements. Those are graphics that may come on the screen that can supplement what we're talking about on the air. So our truck puts in keywords to build about a topic banner about how we got there, the ins and outs, a full page graphic about what moves we made, what players left, what players are coming back. Some news about Kacper Shabilko and Alejandro Bedoya on the 5th point. There's no script for me here. I'm reading. And then it says set up union sound. And then you see after that, there's pregame sound. So my producer, a good producer will say, hey, we're going to show you what Jim Curtin, the coach of the Union, said on Kai Wagner not being here for today's game. And I'm coming in with a lead-in simply saying, here's Jim Curtin on missing one of the best left backs in MLS, Kai Wagner. And he rolls into the tape. And that tape to the right says 45 seconds. And then you can further go on and you can see the different shots and the different graphics. If it says VO, I'm speaking over a graphic or over tape. It's called a voiceover. Some elementary things, I know some of you know that when it's on camera. The way we format it, I know I'm on camera, and the shot will be focused on me and the guest. And you can see at the end, the first block tees where I'm throwing to break and I'm looking at the video, looking at the monitor to share what's coming up next. And we'll talk about these things in pre-production. It's important to go over these things. So for those of you that are in college, you don't need to get this fancy, but I would suggest typing up a rundown or called a format about things you want to include in your opens and in your shows. Here's a sample from 2017 ESPN2 College Basketball Open a producer had for us. You can see that it was a 0-1 tip. Look in the middle, tip at 7:01. So it was a 1 minute open. How quick. There was a quick rejoin animation, that comes up that says like ESPN College Basketball, and it's going to be a logo fly over Philly. And that's like, you're watching the American Conference on ESPN. I'll be reading from a card, but pretty much I've done a lot of these things. You have it memorized, so I don't need somebody to hand it to me. Then I know after that, and we rehearse this, that there's going to be a title card. Tonight from the Liacouras Center, Tulane takes on Temple. Welcome everybody with former Georgetown coach John Thompson III. I'm Dave Leno, and we discuss the things that are in this outline. Dave teased JT on the Temple triple threat. Hey, it's conference play, but let's get to right away. You see point 5, this dynamic trio of Alston, Brown, and Rose. And let John run with that. And we're going to quickly get to faces, and we're going to tip. You see you have the coaches there and their bios, and lineups are going to be over play. So this is something, if for those of you that make it to ESPN, every producer does this differently, but this is for play-by-play, things that you might see. And very important for you guys to work on these things for those of you that are beginning your careers. Ask your producers, even if they're not at ESPN or Fox or CBS, and you're working for a college, hey, can we do a rundown? Because then when you see, for your first ESPN game, even if it's an ESPN Plus from ESPN3, and you're doing it for the school, and it's somebody who works for the college that's coordinating the broadcast, say, this is what the big guys do. I want to do what Holly Rowe gets to work on at ESPN, what Adam Amin gets to work on at Fox, what Joe Davis gets to work on at the Dodgers. I want to do the same thing because I want to prepare myself like those men and women do. Does anybody have, if you have any questions, feel free. I know we're going long here, so feel free to stay for as much time as you have with us today. But if you have a question or you have a comment, feel free to keep raising your hand. But I'm going to continue with some writing for broadcast TV. I told you I was very passionate about today's presentation. So a few more slides to get to today. Writing for broadcast TV. Simply put, less is more, and you got to be simple, but you need to write an active voice. What do viewers want to hear first? And this can apply for when you're scripting your stuff for your opens, if you're a play-by-play man or a woman. The shorter their sentences, what Tony said, what Nate hit on, the better. Simplify your writing. You are not writing a report for your college class. You are writing for broadcast. Knowing when the right time to take pauses and take a breath. Practice in front of a mirror. Have dash, have semicolons. I use those all the time. I write in bullet points. And I know that I don't have to write the words and and some natural transitions, I know to just recite on camera because I've done it so many times. You don't need to have these big words to make yourself sound smart. You want the audience to comprehend what you're saying. If you are in news, you know to organize your broadcast with an open, with maybe a lead-in for your anchor or for your reporter in the field, a middle, and then a close or a tag at the end of your piece. Know which portions of your product will be over graphic, over video, and others that you'll be shown on camera and you'll be responsible for telling the viewer. You do not need to say every single word that is on the screen. So if you have bullet points and it's on the screen, maybe you hit on one or two of those things, or you have a conversation with your analyst about those topics. For those of you that are scripting a story or a rundown in news, Patty Pyburn, who was a journalism professor at Cal Poly, came up with this new now and next. And I have to attribute her with this. I found this awesome. You know, when you're doing a story, what does the audience want to know right off the bat? What are the most pressing details? And this could relate to news or sports. How's that information affecting the audience now? We're in the pandemic. How can they get food even though they cannot dine in store, in the restaurant? And who is impacted? How is it impacting the business people and the customers? And then the next would be, is there going to be street dining? How much seating do they have outside? When will they go to the green phase? Do you see where I'm going there? That new, now, next. If you can organize your scripts, I think that will help you. Here's more detail about writing an active voice. I pulled a book from college called Make It Memorable by Bob Dotson, who was a famed reporter with NBC News. And his book was published in 2000 called Make It Memorable. Active voice forces a viewer to think what is happening now. You want to eliminate the passive voice. So when you're writing a script for broadcast, a lot of noise was made by an approaching hurricane. The hurricane thunders offshore. The active voice is the hurricane thunders offshore. It's short, it's to the point, it's active. It's not was made, it's thunders. Even if you're commenting about a prior football game, Penn State dominated Rutgers. Make it an active voice. Think about how you keep sentences short and simple. Even if you're not into writing, you're saying, Dave, why are you going into writing? This is like a waste of my time, and you sound like this is a college class. I found that my broadcasts, whether I'm doing the Union, the Riptide, when I'm writing my scripts out, I found that the shorter I am, and I said this off the top, the better it looks and sounds on TV. And tight writing is essential for this visual medium. Leave plenty of room for your analyst to come in, whether you're in news, for some natural sound, for some sound on tape, and for the pictures. Look at the examples by Pyburn from Cal Poly there about shortening the sentences. I don't need to read exactly what's there, but you get the point. By just being more simple in your words. Have that active voice. Bring the audience to exactly what you want to have out there. This reporter's checklist by Dotson from his book, Make It Memorable, I thought was awesome. You know, stand-ups, I told you this previously on one of the recent slides. Don't just put stand-ups in because you want yourself in the package. If it can connect the story from A to B, put it in there. If not, don't. Don't have a redundancy of sound on tape. If I have a great shot from this person and from another person, and they both say the same thing, why do you need to put it in there? And your producer might say, we only have 45 seconds to a minute for your hit here. And let's say you're working on a news package. Well, you can take what the one person said, and if it was really good, put that on the air. But maybe what the other person said, you can include in your stand-up, or it can help write your story out there. So having a tight, active voice that's understandable and can help facilitate your writing, I think is very important. Being a good editor. I think there's better people behind the scenes than others, and that's okay. Over time, you're going to learn how to edit your work. that looks more professional, and ask people in your station, on your team, and in your studio to help you with that, and match your words with the action. When I'm doing a play-by-play broadcast, if I'm behind the play, that's no good. Somebody looked at my work and said, on that interception, you were a little bit behind. I was like, damn, it sounded really good. I was like, a pick six, touchdown. But I didn't identify the player until 5 seconds later because I wanted to make sure I got the right name with the number. But somebody pointed that out. So all this stuff that relates to writing, it relates to actually verbal communication as well. Having that active voice, very, very important. If you're a play-by-play person, male or female, you got to be a good storyteller. And here's more from Dotson. That's his book that I was referring to, by the way. In full transparency, it was from college. I still have it. And it's out there for you to buy. I think Bob Dotson, speaks to a lot of college campuses. You probably can look him up if you're not doing so already and you don't know him, but he's been on a lot of NBC shows, Today's Show, Nightly News, all that. You can find out some of his reports if you just YouTube them. For those of you that have trouble writing stories, I would suggest writing the facts in the middle. So this is for news, even if you're a sports writer, even if you're having trouble having a great lead-in for a broadcast that doesn't have a teleprompter. Write the facts and figures that you think people need to know. Your open and close should come to you organically over time as you write that. It's happened to me many times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to come out strong to open up this broadcast, but I know what I'm going to say for topic 2, but for that first point, when I welcome everybody, how am I going to grab everybody? But I would constantly go over material. The use of sound bites, very important to have a great lead in and to also tag it. Be a great storyteller out there. I love when Dotson says right to the corners of your picture. Tell the viewers something they may have missed, even standing next to you. Be descriptive, use all your sentences. Use all your sentences, excuse me. Sam Hyman, who came on here, I think was the second person that came on after Ari, talked about this. When you're a solo person doing a broadcast, how do you get that communication out there? How do you describe the action, getting into the game, having enough material, making it sound awesome, even though there might be 5 people in the stands and the game's going on? And I think if you can paint that picture, whether you're on radio or TV, for those that if they were sitting, what I said to Sam holds true on this slide, if they're sitting next to Nate and I calling the game, or Sam and I, what are they saying? What stats or what stories can facilitate what's going on? Obi Anechionia goes to the line for Temple. Obi has aspirations going to the NBA. And you take that time when he's at the free throw line to tell, it might be, you might only have 15, 20 seconds to tell that story where, in the offseason, he didn't acquire an agent. He worked out for 3 teams, but they said you should really come back to college. Get a little bit more muscle, work on the jump shot, come back strong the next year. Add storytelling, but pick your moments during your play-by-play or whether you're on the radio, whether you're on TV, when the right time is to do that. Dotson writes great at the end of the slide, race day dawn still and clear as if the sky had intended to hold its breath. And there's a shot of the bright blue sky or an autumn sky. I think if you can write to your broadcast, that will help you. I can tell you guys that when I used to do long form features for a PBS affiliate in Indiana with Tony Perkins, who came on here as well, sometimes when I had trouble writing my script, I put all the good shots, the sound, the pictures that I wanted in. I would make a skeleton in my editing bay, and I would put the sound that I wanted. And in between the sound, I knew what I needed to say as a voiceover, what words would match up with the shots, and where a stand-up maybe could go, and how I can move things around. And once you put all the sound together in your skeleton, it helped out making that feature. And that's something that those of you that don't do packages and don't do news stories, you might not understand what I'm saying there. But for those of you that know how to put a story together and some of the cumbersome moments, putting together, a long form package of 5 minutes versus a 90-second thing or a 2.5-minute thing. The best storytelling is filled with the details. Put those thoughts in there. If the people can tell you the story versus yourself, that's even better. Some of the best packages are just SOTs, and there's quick little VOs where it's not a long form thing. Nate touched on interviewing techniques and preparing for your interviews. I will say that don't just walk in and say, who are we interviewing today? What's the subject going to be? Have a game plan with questions ready to go for that interview. Go over the interview with your producer beforehand. Hey, Jordan, is this a good question here? Or what should I follow up this question with? They might love what you have. They might not. And also understand who you're working for. Am I a team employee trying to get a certain messaging out? Or am I for a network and I'm not preparing my guest? And I'm going to grab coach and he's quickly going to get away from me within 45 seconds. And I got to ramble off 3 or 4 things. I have no time to prep anybody. Maybe a producer does not want to hear what I have to say. So know your role and the environment you're in when you're preparing for an interview. But it's always good, and I say this, and I think Nate's really good at this. I think others on here are probably good at this. And that's to make conversation before the interview if you have time. Relax the guest. Open them up. I think Shawnee Hill is on here who has done PA for a lot of big organizations, knows how to do this before someone's seen on the Jumbotron or through a TV audience. Don't lead with those hard-hitting questions. You're not Steve Kroft or Leslie Stahl in 60 minutes. Understand the environment that you're in again. I always think when you go back and post, and what I mean by post is when you're editing your stuff after everything's done, that the short and polished material tends to be your best work. Those short questions, not long form questions like, how I keep going on and on like I'm doing now, and you might be saying, all right, Dave, keep going, keep going. The shorter you are, the more concise you are, the better your product will be. The shorter those questions, it will sound much better on air. And with interviewing, you have to be a great listener. I think a lot of you on this or maybe watching the replay understand that. Follow up. I can come with 10 questions to have for a pregame interview with the union sporting director or a basketball coach at GW. I might only get in 2 of those questions because others will be follow-ups to what that subject said. Follow-ups are great, even if it's a 1 or 2 word follow-up. I love this line by Dotson as well. Quote, uncomfortable silences helps you get a more memorable, shorter soundbite. So stop talking and listen. Now, you might be saying to yourself, we don't want dead air on TV or on radio. But especially if you're doing one-on-one in a longer form story, this might be more applicable. You don't have to keep going from one question to the next and ramble off 10 questions on a legal pad. Take a breath. If you're editing this in post and it's not live, maybe something will come out of it. You never know. So take a step back. You don't need to come off sounding like the interview is about you. It's about the guest and it's about the topic at hand. The length of your interview, like Chris Black said earlier, he was talking about the length of your open, but the length of the interview here, you'll come up with a game plan. You'll know how long you have to go. And a producer or somebody else should help you in this context, or they'll be saying in your ear, all right, it's time to wrap up. So know the difference between a live and a tape piece. But being a great interviewer is being an exceptional listener. Shawnee has a question. Shawnee, you are welcome to come on. And how are you, my friend?
Good. How are you? I'm glad when you were showing rundowns earlier, you did not show any of the ones that I wrote for you with the freedoms. They're much more.
Not intentional, my friend. Not intentional. But go ahead.
But I wanted to build on some of the points talked about interviewing. My history, I have a lot of in-arena hosting, in-game hosting. So really just live presentation and interviews nonstop. I mentioned earlier when Nate was talking about keeping a guest close. A lot of the interviews I've done are being played at the same time over PA. So not only are you dealing with that sound, you have producers, directors in your ears as well. But the couple of great tips that I got as I started my career and I kind of built on is someone once told me about interviewing somebody that it's like when you're getting dinner for a child. So what your goal is to provide them exactly what they need. And then if they don't finish it, that's when you clean it up. So sometimes you get these long rambling questions because you're looking to show off your expertise or get out a note you have, or you're trying to almost over prepare for what your guest is going to say. But chances are the guest is there to say something specific, and then you can fill in the gaps afterwards if need be. And then another point that you talked about, Dave, is like prepping them before. I always felt the best interviews I had is when I could almost seamlessly get that 3, 2, 1, get that light on, whatever you sort of want to do. So the rapport I had with the guest, the conversation was already ongoing. And then for them setting up in a natural position of, okay, well, now we're live. That is usually when you get the best. Some people, if they're not used to being on cameras, especially I'll say with newer analysts. When I worked for ESPN doing USA Rugby, we had some fresh off the pitch, men and women that, just had an injury and they're in the analyst booth. They didn't go to school for it or anything like that. Sometimes getting their comfortability, their comfort level of being on camera, it was all those off-camera conversations that led up to it. And you touched on it many, many times, Dave, and lots of this presentation of those off-camera conversations are going to lead to the best on camera. There's going to be situations where a guest is going to get rushed to you. I got an opportunity to interview Mark Cuban, and I didn't have a second before or a second after. However, once we got into it, kept it natural conversation because I had already talked to my producer and my camera guy. Anyone that was with Mark before he got to me knew how to kind of set him and prepare him for my interview style and what I wanted to get from him. So when it comes to interviewing, you want to make it a natural extension of almost any other part of your broadcasting you're doing. So it's not necessarily take a different approach, but again, just like you talked earlier about doing solo play-by-play, that's still a general conversation. While someone's not responding to you there, you're thinking of someone nodding at home or agreeing with you in that sense. So when it comes to interviewing, that one point is you're there to kind of set up and get the information out of it, but ultimately your guest is the star, the expert and should deliver the meat of it. And then if need be, you can fill in after that. So short, concise, and get into it and be generally interested. And it usually turns out to be a good interview.
That's great stuff. And I wanted to get your perspective, Shawnee, because you're naturally, I know you personally, you're a very funny guy. And you bring, a lot of experience at the table. Like I said, both play-by-play. I think you've done some analysis work. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but also PA as well. What have you found that has produced the best material for yourself when you pick the moments that you want to showcase up to ESPN for rugby, or whether you're doing PA for a company or for a team? What material sticks out to you when you're in post, when you're at the editing bay, when you're at your laptop, you say, this is why X is making my reel versus not? Can you share something on that?
Yeah, so what I like to put on my reel, and just to build a little bit, is I got my start generally in the business from the entertainment side of it, of being the Who Wants a T-shirt guy and that sort of element. Going back to your college point is, if you can find jobs like that, those are great, because usually when I was in press boxes and stuff, I was sitting next to the play-by-play guy, sitting next to the PA, and sitting next to the media, involved in all of that. But what ends up making my reel are opportunities where I can show the same, I'll say, tone and texture of voice, so that you can see I'm composed, you can see I'm prepared, you can see I'm conveying information, but in a variety different, I call it like star levels. So I definitely put, when I set up my analyst, absolutely perfectly. I do put like the good tags on there. I add little elements of that. But also I like to show that I've made, some events that I've been a part of, the Rugby World Series Grand Final with the local, softball championship. the fact that I can show those on the same level. When it comes to interviews, I actually don't put too much on there when it comes to interviews, because effectively you shouldn't be the star of the interview. So sometimes I might have an introduction or a tag. If I do have something, witty or entertaining or kind of a good follow-up, in one of my jobs, I was constantly interviewing kids, and I have one part of my reel that's kind of a mashup of me dealing with children, as I like to affectionately call it. But ultimately what you want to do is show your versatility, but you also want to make it, just like any part of your broadcast, quick and right to it. So interviews actually don't make up a huge part, really very little of my reel. Because again, if you're interviewing in that regard, you don't want to be the star of it. And as for interjecting humor and some stuff that's kind of my personality, you try to get it, but I also know who I'm sending it to. I can always bring my humor to the table. I don't know if that's going to always be the discerning quality for me in a hiring sense, because they're not hiring me to entertain, they're hiring me to be a broadcaster. The fact that I'm an entertaining broadcaster, I think that's something extra I bring to the table, but I don't necessarily want it to be the highlight of my reel, because the other people I might be being judged against might have a deeper voice or a stronger cadence, or, have or more institutional knowledge of that sport. Like, I didn't grow up playing rugby. I had to learn a whole lot before I ended up, doing it for ESPN. So that's my general real advice, I guess.
That's awesome stuff. And lastly, I want to get your take on to expound upon making guests feel comfortable, because, in your roles, I know you've interviewed, kids for games. And I know you've interviewed, star athletes. You mentioned Mark Cuban. You mentioned, we can talk about famous, tennis players that you and I both work with. So how do you compose yourself? Let's say if somebody's really not experienced, like a new analyst, like you were saying for your rugby stuff, and let's say you're interviewing, whether it's a kid or somebody like that, they're very green, right? They're very new, and they're only giving you 1 or 2 word responses to your question. How do you make yourself look good and natural in that moment where the guest is raw?
I think it's okay to allow yourself to be a part of the audience in that regard. When it comes to interviewing, I worked for the Philadelphia Flyers, did the Mites on Ice. You'd interview kids that would be nervous, or as soon as they saw themselves on the boards, they would kind of shut down. It sometimes was a subtle look towards the camera to acknowledge, like, we all saw it. We all saw the kid tense up. We all know what's going to happen here. It's going to be kind of an odd answer, but I think it'll actually touch the point you're looking for. Is one of the best interviews I ever did was for Mites on Ice. We had an autistic group out there, and they were like, "You're going to interview the coach afterwards because the kids don't really want to talk." The kid was like, the middle of the night, the kid wanted to talk, and everyone tense up around, because we were going to put an autistic child, on microphone. And a lot of people have these preconceived notions. Well, for me, I wanted it generally, but as a conversation. But what I did was I had a little understanding of what my guest needed. I couldn't ask an open-ended question. If I was asked something that had a yes or no answer, that's the response I was going to get. Everything I was going to say was going to be generally literal. The same sort of thing is that if I was talking to, Phaedra Knight, who USA rugby player, Olympian, completely accomplished. When I talked to her, even though I didn't have the same rugby sort of knowledge, I had to ask her questions, because she didn't have broadcast experience at this point. I had to ask her questions that got her into thinking she was just talking to a fellow rugby person. Because if I tried to broadcast with a broadcaster, she kind of would overthink. She would kind of go over it. So I think with difficult interviews, or when you're in the moment for difficult interviews, let your personality kind of show. But prior to that, I've had, and Dave, you dealt with this too. Sometimes you might be interviewing a player where English might not be their first language, and they are so nervous about saying the wrong word, or so nervous about organizing their thoughts. And you can know that going on. So don't have difficult words in your question, because they're live translating that. It's the small thing. So as much as you can get, information on who you're talking to will help out. But when stuff goes wrong and stuff goes sideways, just own it. I mean, it's a little bit easier when you're in the in-arena host realm to do that, because it is more entertainment, than pure broadcast. But from the broadcast side, you look at comedy, you look at anything. When something falls down and goes boom, ignoring it brings more attention to it than rolling with it.
Which is why I said that it's important to, you know, have a tag on a broadcast if something goes wrong, or, you know, even if if there has to be an apology there, which I have done on behalf of a broadcast, like, you have to acknowledge it, right? You have to, you know, even if it's a little joke, a little humor, I think everybody's kind of rolling with you at that time. So I really appreciate your thoughts today, and anything else you have, please go for it.
Yeah, Dave, so I wanted to add or kind of ask you, because you and I have a unique relationship, because I was with the Freedoms, then I left to get married. Then you came in, and then I returned to the Freedoms as, you know, a producer director for you. But I was interested
with not for. Come on now.
With. It's with. Yeah. But I wanted to kind of touch upon, I don't know how many here are familiar with, you know, producers, IFBs, things like that, especially through college. I mean, I really didn't get that for a while, you know, having some in my ear, but it's a skill I've tried to hone and develop of how to still maintain speaking while having that voice in your ear. I was wondering if you had any general tips that you want to share from your perspective, because I'll tip a little of your answers. You and I had a conversation. I asked you, hey, do you want me to say full sentences? Do you want me to be quick? Do you want me to come in loud? Do you need a prep before I give you? Now, do I need to say, hey, Dave, and see a move before I go? Do you want to talk a little bit about that relationship?
No, yeah, I remember you asking me that when we first met and started working with each other. So I'd say I've been used to, if you go back in my career, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the first time probably I used an IFB is when I was reporting in Indiana for WTIU, which is the PBS affiliate. I was a student, but getting professional experience. It wasn't the student TV station. I remember, you know, anchoring the news and actually filling in sometimes for Tony Perkins, who was on here, and doing a newscast. I would say that just over time, I got comfortable with people talking to me, but talking at the same time. And now I've gotten to the point where I can do a broadcast, then, you know, I could talk with a tennis player. You're saying in my ear, okay, after your interview, you got to try to get this player, or go to the kid and ask him a question. Whether I'm for ESPN, if I'm doing the broadcast, doing the open, and my producer's saying, hey, instead of this player, we're going to go to that player. I think just over time, simply that I've gotten comfortable with it and used. And it's like a production truck. It's organized chaos. There's 15 people yelling 15 different things, and everybody just has to ascertain all the information that's out there. A lot of people ask that question when it comes to TV, and I would tell the young people that are listening or are going to watch this replay that if you have the opportunity to get an IFB, I recommended on, I think, the previous Zoom, go get your own IFB, get it. They'll send an ear mold to you. There's many companies out there. Not a sponsor here, but like Audio Implements, I think they're based out of Wisconsin, can get you one. I don't think it's expensive at all. They'll send you an ear mold. They'll mold it to your ear, and it's perfect. It will fit right in. It's like your own, you know, earbuds. And I recommend, if you go to a big-time journalism school or a smaller school, to work with an IFB or a headset of some kind where somebody's talking to you. I just think over time, you know, how I would answer that is, it was more of a comfort level. It was saying, keep talking to me as I'm having the conversation with the guest. I will tell you this, and I think you're really good at this, and other people I work with, a good producer in my mind, when I'm interviewing somebody, and say I was with Tony Miola, who did the World Cup at Fox. He filled in on one of the Union broadcasts. I was hosting like the post-game show for the Union in the booth. As Tony was giving an answer, and I'm listening to Tony, also in my IFB, my producer's telling me, hey, after Tony's answer, get us to break as quick as you can on a wide shot. Or just say, you know, we're going to wrap up the show after this. And I'm just so comfortable right now because of all the years of experience. I think for a younger person, and you make the accurate comment, that it might be frightening to hear all these different voices and be like, oh my God, I can't even understand what I'm trying to say. I think it's practice, guys. I think just the more you do it, and especially if you get into it early, I think the easier it is. And for me, it's not a tough thing. I ride the talk back button so much during a broadcast. What I mean by that is I push, you know, the button on the mic box, and I'll talk to the producer a lot. if we're working together, or if I'm calling the game with Nate, and Nate's making a comment, I'll be in contact with my analyst about, hey, are we going, to break at the under 16, or are we going to break, right after the first dead ball, even though we're not at the, the under 4 timeout? What are we going to show? Hey, after this comment that Shawnee said, I'm going to talk about Fabrice Martin of the Philadelphia Freedom, so maybe they can get a shot. So I'm constantly hearing voices in my head, and I'm cool with that. So I know that doesn't help, Shawnee, people improve upon that aspect. I just think over time, I've gotten more comfortable with all those voices.
Yeah, I would say just that the final item is, I think your prep helps too. Dave, I think you're really good at it because the way you prepare. And so at no point are you ever really saying anything that you haven't prepared to say. So when new information comes in, you can almost subconsciously default that you know what you are saying, so whether you're wrapping up an interview, whether it's during play-by-play or anything like that, I think that's what helps kind of separate that brain, is the more you're prepared, then everything you say becomes so much more natural that your brain then has the ability to, okay, subconsciously do the natural thing while we, articulate and translate what's being said to us.
Agree. And I don't think you should ever walk into a scenario and say, all right, here's who we're rolling with. I know sometimes, especially, I think Nate could tell you a lot about this, and others. Shawnee, I know you can. In a post-game scenario, sometimes you really can't prepare 4, 5, 6 questions with a player. It might be, the 3 stars in a hockey game, and maybe you can grab one of the stars and it's going to go out to the whole, 20,000 in the arena. But as you're walking down to that player, even if it's a simple question, I don't like, and I actually said this to my wife last night. I think it was this morning. I hate, despise, strong words. I don't like when a reporter or an anchor says, talk about in an interview. It's a cop-out. You're getting off too quick. Too easy is what I guess I should say, the word I'm looking for. Ask them a pinpointed question. Don't say, talk about tonight's performance as I'm walking down to grab Claude Giroux of the Philadelphia Flyers. Claude, you had a goal tonight. Don't say, take us through the goal. I cringe when that happens. And so many experienced anchors and reporters do it. And I consciously say to myself, I'm never going to do that. Even if I don't have a great question. Even if it's an open statement. Claude, you had a fantastic goal in the first period. Let him, if you know the player and you know that he's just going to talk his ass off, let him roll with it. Sometimes you don't need to have a pinpointed question. But please, I don't know why, Sean, I just got on a tangent about that, but I'm laughing because literally that was a conversation today watching the morning news, and this reporter kept saying, talk about twice in a row.
Yeah, I don't want to take up any more time from anybody there, but I think why it came to your head is when you think about those post-game interviews, is there's sometimes like, this is the player of the game, this is the player of the match, we want this person, and you go up there, it might be a PR person, maybe the player themselves, just like, I can't. And now you're interviewing someone who we didn't just go over stats and we didn't just load graph, we didn't do all this. And so it's a natural sort of thing is, hey, talk about that first half there. It's very easy just to be like, I need to get my bearings. Mm-hmm. But I've been working on getting out of talk about is, ask a pinpointed question, but it goes back to just ask something to get them going. And then if they don't fill in what you needed, you can ask a follow-up, especially in the reporting sense, you ask a follow-up. Or if you're not a reporter, you're just a pure broadcaster in that sense, you can follow up with an additional question that'll guide it a different direction. But
and use the time of your sport that you're involved in, and that's kind of a simple way. If you really you're not finding that question. I think it happens to people like me. I think it happens to people watching this too. Claude, what changed from period 2 to period 3 to enable you guys to pull out the W in this? And then that follow-up could be your second question. So in a basketball game, I try not to do it because it's kind of a simple question, but maybe it's just the thing that goes in your mind. Coach, what changed half number 1 to half number 2? Skip, what changed in the latter 2 innings of this baseball game? So time can be your friend on some of those questions there, and then maybe you can get to specific details. But for those watching, don't say talked about. So talk about. Thank you, Shawnee, for the perspective today. That was awesome stuff. Getting back to the point, a couple more slides, everybody, and then we'll wrap it up. So thanks everybody for being here. How to mark your improvement. I tell a lot of young people, get as many copies of your work as you can. Make your own YouTube channel, make your website, go to wordpress.com, make your own YouTube for free, upload your work there. No excuse not to have a website, especially in today's age, if you want to go into news or sports broadcast. When I do a game for, I'll just say the Philadelphia Union or the New York Riptide, I watch my stuff as soon as I can, sometimes in the car ride home. If I DVR it, I can watch it on my phone. Obviously, when I'm at a red light or not driving, I don't want to, advocate doing that. But when I come back home, I pop on the DVR and I'll watch the Union show, sometimes late at night, or I'll watch it in the morning if I'm just really drained and tired. And I want to watch it as quick as I can because I want to get all that information back to me because I'll remember what I was thinking about in that moment. I know some of you in college maybe can't do that, but that means every time you do a story for your student broadcast, try to get a copy and save it to your external hard drive. There's a lot of work that I have that I did not save, and there's a lot that I did save that you can go up and look right now on YouTube from Indiana. And it shows the growth that I've had in this career. Not that I'm sending that to employers, but it's awesome to see how I sounded, how I looked, how I performed in 2009 to 2020. It's awesome to see that projection. I watch myself like for a Union broadcast over again to see what everybody else is watching. Things I thought sounded great, I'll watch on TV and I'll cringe. And I'm my own worst critic. But I think it's very important to be critical of your work to improve upon the next time you're out there. Whether it's a parent, whether it's a husband, whether it's a wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or somebody that's just a friend or your father figure or colleague in the business, show them your work. Ask them what you liked. Ask them what they didn't like part of your broadcast. A lot of people during this downtime have said, what should I be doing? I've mentioned on some of the Zooms over the past 3 months to go on YouTube. It's free. And watch some of the broadcasters that you love in this business. Watch some of your favorite play-by-play people, your favorite analysts, your favorite sideline reporters, your newscasters. Look them up. Look up their backgrounds, but look at their work. You don't have to copy their style, but see what they did that you love. And instead of emulating what they did, you can take some things and apply it to your broadcast. But I think you need to be true to yourself when you watch your material. I've told you this on previous Zooms that I write down reminders on note cards and I bring them to the set. I have them right next to my notes. I read through that card right before I'm about to go on air with that live open or that live hit. It will say things as simple as smile, good posture, smooth, polished, game calling. Let your analyst shine, not broadcast specific things. Make sure my tie is straight. Make sure I pull my suit down so there's not that gap in between the back end of your suit. And review it. I would definitely recommend people to do that. I always challenge myself from one show to the next. What's one thing or two that I can do differently on the next broadcast? And sometimes I'll do the same thing again. On one broadcast, I kept saying as well after almost every sentence in one block. I don't know why. It was just a crutch phrase. And I heard it on air, and maybe people wouldn't catch it, but I caught it, and I said, the next time I do this, I'm not going to say those two words. And I didn't. Sometimes I went back and I did, but I kept putting it in my brain. Do not say as well after every sentence. So those reminders, seeking positive feedback, but also constructive feedback. A lot of people that will review your work say you're great, and that's awesome. But take the time to thank the people that say, well, you really should work on this part of your broadcast or that. And I think what I like to do when I review somebody's work truthfully, and this is what I would like the good and the ugly. And sometimes it's a little hard to swallow because you think you had an awesome A+ show and nothing went wrong. But the business is so subjective that somebody may catch something that might help your career. So I would definitely advise that moving forward. Get all that information. Lastly, on this improvement slide, I chart my career from when I started at Indiana to now. And I'll do it year by year. What gigs I gained, what gigs I lost. And it's happened to the best of us. I've had some amazing opportunities. I thought, man, I just go one year to the next and just, not personally, sometimes things happen that we don't like, but they go away for whatever reason. A team folds, maybe the production doesn't like you, maybe you're just not good enough, maybe your position was eliminated. And I chart the highs and lows of my career. And I never want to be just coasting. Now, I don't want to lose things, obviously, but if I can I challenge myself 1 or 2 different things each year, and it might not be work. It might be better contacts. Hey, I got in with this network. What I mean by got in, I made some contacts at this network. Maybe it will lead to me getting a shot in a couple of years. I befriended a couple analysts, and I'll write that down. Mike Corey of ESPN, and it's on my last slide, but I will tell you, Mike Corey came on one of my Zooms. He was fantastic. If for those of you that don't know Mike, he does play-by-play for a variety of ESPN broadcasts, basketball, football, lacrosse, does the Olympics. Look up that Zoom and how he organizes, how he meets people, how he writes down notes in their phone about personal connections he's made, how he asks for the names of the people, the men and women on his crew, how he goes about following up with a potential employer, how he'll send him things. And I think that's so crucial. And that's getting to my networking slide. But if you don't know Mike and you don't know how he networks, I learned so much about how he goes about it. I highly recommend you just look up Dave Leno, Mike Corey Zoom. Look at that. We'll get to that in just a moment. Shawnee hit on this, but I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I also do. A couple last slides here. emceeing at an event or your speaking engagement for those of you that get that opportunity to do for your college. And this can be for, speaking in front of a class if you're in school. This can be emceeing professionally. Here I'm emceeing at a local charity, the Miracle League in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And it's being a performer, but being confident in your work and not making the event about you, having that authoritative voice, just like you're on TV, on radio, adhering to a script, having conference calls with the people who hire you. You see how I'm dressed professionally for the role there in the picture, because I know a lot of eyes are going to be focused on me. So if I'm at a golf outing, I know everybody in the room is dressed in their golf attire. I played at the golf outing. I spoke in my golf attire. It was appropriate. This occasion, I knew people were going to be in shirts and ties. I wore a three-piece suit. I talked to these people at the Miracle League for this charity that I got asked to do, and I donated my time for what they wanted out of the production, what they wanted from me. And I told them what I could deliver for them. And I went through a script and I introduced, you see on the left of the picture, famous comedian Joe Conklin. If you're ever in Philadelphia and you hear him on 94 WIP on the morning show, and he does bits about athletes and players and coaches, it's actually really funny. And so introducing him and some other guests who were honored there for all their charity work, going over pronunciations with sponsors. Even if you walk up to that sponsor and you say, how do you pronounce your company name or logo? How do you pronounce your name? It's not embarrassing. You want to get it right amid a packed house. You want to speak to the back of the room so people understand you. You never want to hear people yell, "I can't hear you, Joe." Go over a mic check with your people, even if it's for a small event. And even if you need to be the one who's the producer, the de facto person that needs to take charge, say, I want to run through this. I want to go up to the stage. I don't care if people are enjoying themselves at cocktail hour or nobody's in the classroom. Let's just make sure my PowerPoint works. You know, when I prepare for these Zooms, many of you obviously don't know this, but I'll go through a test run and I'll make sure everything's working properly. I try to look through my PowerPoints and make sure things aren't misspelled. I'm not going to be perfect. There's going to be some misspelled things. Maybe some videos drag on, but I try to make it as professional as possible in any setting. I have great body language. I lead the crowd to applause when the time's right. I might comment on an interview or a funny moment. I myself, I'm never stoic or robotic. Just have to have some simple public speaking skills for those of you that have taken classes in high school or in college. But have fun with the gig. And if you don't make it about you and make it about the guest, you still can be the lasting impression of that event. And you can, as an MC, make or break a banquet. So this is the last slide, and I know we've been long today, so I greatly appreciate everybody's time, but it's going with that Mike Corey theme about networking, which is a really big theme for everybody that has been on these Zooms for the past 3 months. And that's, when's the right time to get to the next step in your career, and how do I make the connections to get me from A to B? Even if you're comfortable in your job, I love what I do at the Union for the New York Riptide, for World Team Tennis. I'm always trying to make contacts and relationships. Heck, I've connected with all of you through this. No matter where we are in our careers, we've gotten to follow each other. Some of us have more experience than others, but we still can learn from one another. And that's why, I provided this outlet, because I wanted to learn from all of you too. Even though I've been, putting these together and getting some cool guests, I've learned so much over the past 3 months, and I'm forever grateful for those of you always signing up and coming on here to participate. We're connecting, not just at a professional level, but on a personal level. When you are asking people for advice or for a review, and I know probably a lot of you know this, but don't ask for a job right out of the gate, especially if you don't know the person. Don't say, I would like to get a package on ESPN, if you make that connection with an ESPN producer. That is not the way to go about this business. You can be persistent, but don't be a pest. And I think a lot of you have heard that saying before. You'll have to discern when it's the right time to send material to a particular person or a network. And if you're going for a basketball job or a baseball job, send a tape that's baseball or basketball. Don't send a multi-sport reel unless you say, I can do a variety of things for ESPN. I call baseball, basketball, lacrosse, tennis, and college football. I wanted to put them on a short reel for you. Here are all those things in one link versus a long form thing. There's a lot of rejection in this business. You'll often get ignored. I get ignored. It happens, but don't take no for an answer. Just move on to somebody else. Don't keep sending email after email to that person if they're not going to take the chance on you. There's a yes around the corner, and it might take 99 no's before that one yes. Rejection sure is prevalent in this business. How you go upon following up on unanswered emails. Maybe you can send a follow-up in a week's time, 2 weeks. Maybe you go to somebody else in the company and said, I tried to reach out to Carol. The introduction went unanswered. So I thought you were the next best person. Maybe they can connect the dots for you. Oftentimes, I'll give you a little hint here. It's not a surprise. If you know somebody within the organization or team, and you have a connection, it's not fake, it's genuine. And you could say, I worked with Dave on the Philadelphia Union. He mentioned that you might be somebody good to reach out to. You tend to get a response when you can make that connection within an organization versus coming in cold. Just for whatever it is these days, a lot of people aren't receptive to cold calling. And I put on here, if you have the number and you think it's worth it, even if their application, like this particularly pertains to like a news job, they'll often say no phone calls, please. If you get the number and you have it, you get it online, you just have to decide whether it's good to take the shot and call that person. And they will answer. And don't be shell-shocked. Just rehearse it in your mind if they say, why did you call me? And you can give them the reason of X, Y, and Z. Mr. News Director, I thought this was my only shot. And you can tell them why, and you can phrase your things. I will tell you that when you do cold call or you cold email, if you will, try to keep your stuff as short as possible. Sometimes I get long form emails, and I think a lot of you probably do, or you write them, right? You want to introduce yourself, you want to tell them all about your experience and all the cool things you've done. I can tell you if that person probably doesn't know you, that, and it's not because they're mean, it's probably because they're busy and they have other things to do. They have a family to worry about. They have their job. They have other things that maybe the short, more concise version can get you that foot in the door first, and they'll be more inclined to respond. And the second time around, it might lead to a phone call or maybe a more elaborate email. Maybe you send one link of your demo instead of 5 different links from a basketball, football, soccer, tennis, golf. Some things that I've worked on, just some advice that I can share to you, that I've tended to get responses on, the shorter the emails that I send versus what would be 2 pages. So having some creative ways to keep in touch. I mentioned the Mike Corey Zoom. Please look at that. Handwritten notes are great. Holiday cards, I think they're lost arts. I like to still handwrite thank yous. Coming up with cool ways. If you're applying for a baseball job, sending a baseball with your name and your contact info on that, or why you really want the job, or a mini football. Or with your holiday card, you have a business card, or a headshot with their company's logo that you could potentially work with them and saying, this is the perfect fit, Dave with company X. So always try to foster connections and relationships, even when you're not working or you're comfortable. And I applaud everybody who's been on here still for, the long time today, because you're doing that today. You don't know everybody who's on here, but you're seeing who's on. We're learning from each other. You've heard some from people you don't know from Adam, and you're making a connection. And I think that's really, really important to do. And networking is not easy. Rejection is tough. Climbing the business is really, really hard. I have some friends that have totally burned out and have pieced out because they're not making the money. They see other people. They want to start a family. And I've said this to you many times. Don't compare yourself to others in the business, especially when they're your age or younger. If I could tell you how many times I hear somebody saying, I can't believe this guy coming out of Syracuse got an ESPN package. Can't believe this guy got a shot on CBS. How come I didn't get a shot? How come she got a sideline reporting job over me? The business is subjective. Maybe they have a famous father. Maybe they got in with a talent agency. Maybe they're just more talented than I am. But you can review their work, and there's no harm in doing that and saying, hey, what's 1 or 2 things on their demo that you possibly think stood out? Or talk with a friend and say, hey, do you see that guy? Why do you think he got that game? Instead of saying, you can't get there. Because you got to think you can. I always tell myself, I think I can improve in the business. I can climb, no matter my age, no matter what people think of me. Because for everybody that likes me, there's probably as many people that don't. But all it takes is that one team, network, or station to take a liking. And I will end by saying this. It's not national or bust. It's not network or bust in this business. If your goal, you should never make it a goal to be famous, or, if you want to make money, everybody wants to have comfortable living, right? but that's your prerogative, how you define success. But you gotta, if you want to be in this business, I can tell you from just my journey, it's about loving it. It's about finding the passion, the desire to make it, and doing it with the love, whether somebody's paying you a lot of money or not. I've told you I've worked for gigs for nothing. I've done mock broadcasts for nothing, getting into college stadiums when I couldn't get work. And I've done gigs that were good paying jobs, that were awesome. I've worked with a lot of cool people, and I want to work with a lot of those men and women again on the national level. But I'm always grateful for what I have at the smaller levels that I do, because, and it goes with what Nate said about his bow tie, what Tony said in his jobs, you never know who's listening and who's watching, no matter where you are. And especially if you're a younger person on here and you think, I'm doing a D2 or D3 game or a small D1, or maybe I'm just talking into a camera by myself. You put it online, you never know. I've heard so many interviews lately during this quarantine. I know a lot of people say, oh, you need an agent to make it. You need an agent. I do not have an agent. And I don't think an agent is the end all be all. And I think agents will tell you that. But a lot of them will say, they'll peruse Twitter. They'll look at their Instagram. They'll look at your Facebook, and they'll see what you put on there, how you present yourself personally and professionally. And if you want to have a career in sports, whether you're on camera or not, just know that you're always going to be in the public eye. Just know that the things you put out there are going to live forever. Know that in the internet, nothing really is ever private. Things will get out. And treat people with respect. And that's how I want to end this, by being the person you are on and off the air. I can tell you, people who know me, I'm the same guy as I'm talking to you now as I am off the air when I'm about to wrap this up. That's who I am. Others have two different personalities, can turn the on-air guy or girl and can shut down and just go to their car after the game. That's just not the person I am. I tend to stay at a game. I talk with the crew, whether they're on air or not. I treat everybody the same. That's the person I am. I think you can command respect when you're going for your next job. And it's down to you versus the other person. And you're both similar talent, but that person's hard to work with and you're just the nicest guy or gal, probably going to get the job because you're easy to work with. And so don't let anybody in this business hinder your path to success. Just because one person says you're not talented enough, you're not good enough, keep in the back of your mind that I'll show him or her. Maybe you didn't have your best day on that broadcast. Maybe you didn't present yourself, but the next time you go out and you do it differently and you present yourself in a better fashion. And that's what I'd say to all of you, is to keep going for your dreams. Don't let anybody say you can't make it. I believe there's so many different media out there. So even if we don't get to CBS, Fox, ESPN, NBC, or we don't get to MLS or the NBA, NHL, college basketball, there's a place for you to make it. You could be a rising star on local TV, or for your athletics department, or in your local town doing something other than broadcasting. You'll know, and only you'll know as life goes on, what I've learned, when the right time is to go from one job to the next. You'll know. Somebody might have their opinion, say, what, that person's still there? No. You'll know when the time is to make the move by your surroundings. And I thank you all for listening today. It was over a 3-hour discussion, and I sincerely appreciate it. I hope it was helpful. I was really revved up for it, and it was an 18-page PowerPoint, and I say that because I want you guys to know things that I didn't know, and I want to share this information, because if you're somebody like me out there coming out of college, or maybe you're ahead of me or you're behind me, we're sharing ideas, and that's why I love these collaborative forums. So with that, I'm going to end this Zoom. It was a long one. I really appreciate Those of you that are left, you are awesome people, and stay healthy and safe out there, and look out for our next one. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
You're so welcome. Bye-bye.